Okay, so we're going to start right away because my colleague and now how can I say this? Well, I won't say friend. It's different. It would be like an alter ego. So my alter ego's here. So you all know Sid Dixon. So she wants to. This is like my favorite group in the world. I mean, your favorite. I mean, you're my favorite too. But I mean, this group is.
You have a lot of favorites. Well, good morning. I actually saw Charlene coming into the building. I thought, oh, this must be ALS Day. And I just first want to thank you for your amazing work and share a little miracle that happened yesterday with you. So yesterday, we were up on Capitol Hill at the Education Interim Meeting, and we were sharing data. I know that Dr. Estrada has shared with you our Education Elevated and looking at our 2022 goals, and they're really robust. I really appreciate Christelle and her willingness to stand by my side and say it's not enough for us to just increase by 2 percentage points each year over time, but we've got generations of kids that are expecting us to do better by them. And so we're really trying to cut achievement gaps by a third in 5 years. And those are robust data. I mean, when we look at some of the metrics that we're using, people just say it's impossible, you can't. And we say, yes, we can. So as we were giving our progress report yesterday on the Hill and showing the data on things like ACT and graduation and really focusing on achievement gaps, I was told not to really focus on achievement gaps, that our legislators don't always like to talk about that, and they really don't like to hear the word equity and some of those things that I just continue to use. And so we plowed forward, and one of the more conservative members of the committee, after looking at all the data, we had pointed to our students learning English in red because that's where our significant achievement gaps are. And he started to really focus on that and ask a lot of questions. And at the end, he said, well, what do we do? And I said, we know what to do. It's not that, I mean, we know. We have the research. We have pockets of promise all over the state. We know what to do. We just need to scale it up, and that takes resources. I kind of went into some of those, and he said, then I think as a legislator, we need to focus on this, and we need to know what you want from us. And 3 or 4 people started to nod and said, yes, this is a place for us to focus this year, and we need to know what you need from us. So this is the time, like we have this sweet spot where if we really get very strategic and specific about statewide strategies and the resources that we need to support our students who really are struggling academically and sometimes in other ways, but let's make it happen. So I wanted to show up today to give you that charge to help us. So you need to advise us to say, here are the things we should ask for legislatively, whether it's policy or funding, but let's get a really clear statewide plan together. And I feel pretty confident we can get it funded. So that was just a little miracle that occurred, and you were the group I needed to talk to about it today. So thanks for showing up and for all the work you do each and every day. This is a power group. Like, I'm looking around this table going, oh my gosh, I know most of these people, and they are smart people. So if you all can't figure it out, it can't be done. So thank you.
Thanks. Okay, let's give her a hand for courage. Okay, so we have so much to do. So does everybody have an agenda? Okay, and the people that are online, I sent you the agenda and all the support materials, but I'm not going to spend time getting it up on the screen. I will in a minute when we first start. So what I'd like you to do is go around, because some people are new. I just want to welcome them. Some people, get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and catch a plane from southern Utah to hang out with us. So I just want to make sure, that we all recognize each other. So because it's the end of the year, I want you to think about something, and it can be anything. It can be in your personal life as well as your kind of career life or your policy life or your political life or whatever, however you want to frame that. And think about something that has been transformative. It's like a wake-up call. Most of the time we walk through our lives as if we're sleepwalkers. even when we're in the shower, we're not really taking a shower and enjoying the water. We're thinking about everything we have to do, during that day. So we miss the opportunity to be thankful for water and all of that. So I'm just really encouraging you to be more present in your life, and then just take a minute and think about something that's been made you think differently or has made you happy. Cultivating happiness is something that people in the United States typically don't do very well. And that's actually not good for the people around them. It doesn't make other people happy either. And it makes you less kind. And so if we're going to do this really important work for families and kids and communities, then we have to really take care of ourselves as well. I think that piece is really important. Okay. So I'll model it because I never ask people to do things that I wouldn't do myself. So I'm Christelle Estrada. I'm the Title III specialist, and I've only been in this position, I don't know how long, 2 years, 3 years? Seems like forever. I don't know. Seems like 25 years. And the thing that's made me the happiest is getting up and dancing to that tune. That's what's made me the happiest. No. So one of the things that we've done at the agency is every Tuesday morning at 7:45 we do mindfulness for stress-based reduction. And then at 8 o'clock, after we finish, then I send out resources for them to see how they could actually apply it to their own lives and their families. And people have, we've done this for 3 weeks, and we've, from a group of 12, we're now at a group of 18 that's all across the agency. So we have people from who are administrative assistants, who are secretaries, who are tech people, who are in teaching and learning, special ed, student services. And one of the things that they say is that just that practice is now integrating into their own life, and they end up being, because the whole function of mindfulness is, stress reduction. So if you're living your life in stress, then the only thing that your brain secretes automatically is cortisol. And that just trashes everything in your internal organs. So I'm recommending, I'll send something out to all of you based on the things that we're doing here, so you can see how you can cultivate kind of that practice for yourself. Because if we're actually going to make a difference, and now we have the opportunity of conservative legislators on our side, then we have to actually take advantage of that. So you guys have to take care of yourselves. So for me, the transformative moment was, when we were sitting in this room together, and then people afterward told me the difference it made in their day. So that's the thing for me. So we'll just kind of go around, if that's okay. So can we start with you? So you say your name and what school district you're from, and then anything that's made a difference in your life.
Okay. Okay, so I'm Megan Navarro. I'm the ALS secondary specialist in Alpine School District. I think I would have to say recently, something that has stood out to me just in my work is we've had a little bit of turnover with our secondary ELD teachers in our district. And so one of the things that I've been working on over the last couple of weeks is training new ELD teachers who are coming on board for next year. And I have been struck by the excitement and the passion that these new people bring with them, how they recognize a need for making sure that our ELs are taken care of, that they are being served appropriately. And that's something that has been very uplifting and positive for me to be able to see in these new teachers who you probably at this point don't know what they're getting into, but to see that excitement and that passion for serving our ELs.
I'm Jerry Merkley, director in Alpine School District. This year we decided when the WIDA results came in that we would make beautiful certificates for those who had achieved our exit criteria, and they are gorgeous. So we've sent them to our site liaisons and asked that the principal actually present them, and I was shocked. We have so many schools, so our pockets of L's at those schools are small. And so principals don't always really take a vested interest in that group. But in the majority of cases, they have agreed to either step into the classroom or have the student called to the front office to present those certificates. And so we're thrilled. I was extremely happy at the cooperation and the acknowledgement that our administration will now give to the achievement of those students.
So I hope you're taking notes because the issue about recognition is really incredibly important. Believe it or not, it actually secretes in your brain. Your brain actually secretes oxytocin because when you're recognized, it actually happens that you're actually connected to somebody else. As soon as that happens, it's like giving a hug to somebody. And so your brain actually, one section of your brain, which is the self-soothing system of the brain, secretes oxytocin. So I suggest you really make a practice of recognizing people, especially kids who are working hard and principals as well as teachers.
I'm Larry Abraham. I'm the Federal Programs Director for Tooele County School District. And speaking about hugs, I had that experience this week. I'm on the 39th line of years of experience, and I went back to one of my former schools that I was a principal of for a year. And when I went in, one of the second grade classes that are now sixth grade, they got up from their lunch table and they came over there and they gave me a huge group hug. And I just was filled with joy and the recognition and the time because I spent a lot of playground time with them at recess and everything, and then we had built a great relationship, and they remembered everything, including the high fours that they request every time they see me. And then yesterday I was out at Ivapaw with the Native American students we have in Ivapaw, and they recognized us during our awards recognition promotion that we did as a Native American ceremony that we did on the reservation. And those kids just lit up their faces with smiles when they saw me walk in and just acknowledged their joy of seeing me as well as my joy of seeing the bright, happy, engaged faces that they were. And that's priceless.
Thanks, Larry.
I'm Danelle Muir, and I'm here as the chair of the Access Committee, which is an advocacy committee for the State Board of Education on issues of equity. And my transformation thinking takes on kind of a more personal tone, mainly because I have time to watch a little bit of TV now. But I saw Oprah Winfrey on a talk show, and it was shortly after there had been some very negative tweets written about her by someone in the political arena. And the question was, how are you going to respond to this? What are you going to do? And she made the comment, I am not going to spend one bit of negative energy on this. I am not going to let this take away my positivity. And I thought, what an amazing lesson that is, because we do get sucked into those negative type things. And I thought it's something I need to be more aware of in my life, of not spending the energy that I have on negative things like that. So.
Thank you.
I'm Kathy Einhorn. I am currently the Associate Superintendent for Teaching and Learning for Park City Schools, and ALS is under my purview also. I've had the opportunity this year also to be interim principal at our high school since November. And as difficult as that has been to juggle both jobs, I think one of the most rewarding things has been to work with students again to listen to kids. I've had a lot of opportunities during the walkout, before the walkout, listening to their plans, listening to why they were doing that, and met with student council several times, listened to our LIA students, And it has been so reassuring. It has given me so much hope for this generation who is bright. They're bright. They have brilliant ideas about what they want to fix in the world. And so that has been really rewarding this year.
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to the Park City High School kids. They're Park City High School kids, East High, West, Ogden, and they're a part of a student parent advisory group rewriting the rule for access to early college and AP classes. And so they were virtually working on transcripts to analyze. They were analyzing East High focus group, and they were actually at Park City. So they were analyzing the East High kids' transcripts. So that's what we have to be. That's what we have to focus on, right?
Tracy Evans. I'm the Associate Superintendent of Teaching and Learning on deck for Park City School District. So, the first thing was the risk taking is energizing, but then in conjunction with that, I just want to piggyback off Dr. Estrada. We received a grant for a mindfulness grant. And so practicing that and trying to keep it all in balance has been a really positive, good thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, when we get to the section on promising practices, Tracy was at Ecker Middle School, and so we did some videotaping there on their mentoring program and their work with Spanish-speaking parents, which we're going to disseminate and now put on this, now that we were going to do this anyway, but now apparently since conservative legislators are very concerned about how they can help us, so we're actually going to use the videos that we took at Ecker with your kids. So thank you for that, and thank you for your commitment to the Spanish-speaking parents. I saw some of the best middle school instruction with English learners at Ecker. And I also saw some of the best instruction in content link classes at Park City High School, the co-teaching at Hillcrest High School, the AVID tutorials at Granite Park Junior High. So I've seen some of the most extraordinary actual practices that are happening. We don't have to go to Virginia and Massachusetts and Texas to see that. We already have this. And now we're just focusing on how to disseminate it and support teachers in adjusting their practice appropriately. So we should be proud of that. We shouldn't be, all kind of depressed and weird. It's a waste of energy. It's on.
I'm Cheryl. I work with Granite School District. I'm a teacher specialist. I work with Charlene. And mine is going to be more of a personal nature. I've just noticed that it benefits everybody when you take time for yourself. And I'm recently very thankful that my dogs insist every morning, bright and early, that I get up and take them for a walk around the block. So it gives me time to think, and it gives me time to de-stress and start the day correctly.
Yeah, I think I've said this before, but there was research that came out last year that showed one of the key indicators for increased longevity was to have a dog. And if you notice the mindfulness posters up, you'll see that my favorite poster is, a dog sitting next to the master, and the master or the person who's the owner has all the stuff in the head, and the dog is just there, is just present. And the other thing is Rich School District. We work with them, and we're doing a year-long mindfulness, and they ended up getting a Title IV totally paid grant for Rich School District. And I met with the superintendent, so I'll do the initial stuff with parents and families on the neuroscience of mindfulness, and then they'll do monthly meetings with Salt Lake's Jason Tackett, who is certified as a mindfulness in schools person. So we have two restorative justice people who have been hired, and we're creating a mindfulness network because there are pockets of effective mindfulness. Moss Elementary is probably one of the best examples I've seen. There are individual mindfulness kits in the classrooms, and then the principal as well as the social worker every Monday does a mindfulness exercise. So there are ways to help student self-regulation instead of, what the alternative is when kids are stressed out. Charlene?
Good morning. I'm Charlene Louie, Director of Educational Equity and Granite School District, and with that, working specifically with Title III. Couple of things. Cheryl, to my right, is invaluable, so I just wanted to celebrate all that she brings into our department and her talents. And one of the things, our district is on the road to proficiency-based grading. And so one of the struggles is, what does that look like for ELs? And so Cheryl and Nathan and Devin, the three teacher specialists, only three with 22,000 plus ELs in our district, 17,000 which are being served. It really is a very daunting task, but I'm proud to say that we launched our very first drafts. And so I look forward to getting not only the input from my district, but from some of our fellow colleagues around this table too, as we venture into this. And the other piece is that just for Christelle, I now have a mindfulness book right next to my bed, so that before I go to bed and when I wake up in the morning, I can remind myself of these things. And I'm looking forward to being more involved in that. But thank you. It's great being with all of you.
Thanks, Charlene. People are texting me that there's no connection to the people who are virtual. So I'm listening, but I'm just trying to figure out how to tell Jerry that they're not connected. Okay, go ahead.
I'm Dinah Scott, and I'm the ESL specialist in the Washington County School District in St. George. And this year I've had a great opportunity to facilitate professional development sessions with our ESL and Title III paraprofessionals, and that's been very rewarding.
Thank you. Thank you for making the flight up when we get together. Thank you.
I'm Marcia Davidson. I'm from C.S. Lewis Academy, and apparently I'm the ALS director. I'm the ESL teacher. I'm supervisor. I'm a Spanish teacher. I am the test coordinator. And I think sometimes a behavioral specialist. So I'm just going to share what happened last week. This is what came to my mind when she was talking about, being in the moment. A child who we've had problems with, his behavior for most of the year, was acting out. So they came to get me, and I was frustrated initially. But then I just thought, fighting against this is not going to help. And so I just started, I stole his nose, put it in my pocket, sat down, looked at the rocks with him. And it didn't take very long, and he did calm down. And I was able to bring him in to my room and talk to him. And he had a better day after that. So,
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, you people in the back, we actually have two chairs here. We have a chair here, we have a chair over there, a chair here. So you shouldn't be shy. So if
and
you come
I'll
up
pass my mic back when I'm done.
Yeah, well, no, I think they're coming up because then they're less shy. This is a really nice group of people. So, you don't need to be worried. I appreciate it. Right. Yeah, no one is. This is what the research calls social anxiety, which has to do with people's ideas about what other people are thinking about what they're thinking about them. Okay, so the point is nobody's thinking anything about any of you. So, you should just come up. Okay.
I'm Nancy Ward, and I'm, like many of you, wear many hats in Jordan School District. ALS Director is one of them. And I am so stressed, and so I love this. I just love being here and hearing about this, and I'm looking forward, Christelle, to you coming out and providing some therapy for me.
Remember, I'm not certified as a therapist. I'm just kind of a nutcase who always, tries different things. So.
Okay, I'm Alex Key. I'm the ESL coordinator for Guadalupe School, and I'm not sure what the question was that we're answering, but I assume it's something with in the moment and education, something that happened.
Well, the big thing is that you can define it however you want. I mean, that's kind of the point. And so if you say who you are and where what school you're from, and then what has been a transformative moment. So we're not interested in the past. We're interested in the way the past creates a different kind of future for us. So, but it's personal, right? So it's about you. So
I'm I'm a numbers person. I like data. I like quantifying data and putting percentages and such. And so we just compared last year's WIDA scores to this year's WIDA scores, and we saw some great improvement.
Good.
Especially with my EL directed instruction. I unfortunately can't get to all my ELs because we have over 170 and I'm only one person. So out of the 59 that I tutored, a grand massive majority.
With this, we have so many questions because we're all kind of trying to figure out this online. We're going to try to go online this coming year. So we're excited and ready for a new adventure and a new boss. Thank you.
So thank you. And remember, people are not just anything. It's like, so yeah, so you're special whatever position you do, the position isn't really the point. So okay, who else? I think we're over here.
Well, good morning. My name is
Okay, but you have to actually speak into the microphone.
Okay. Myra Zell. I'm the ALS coordinator and teacher and everything else at Entheus Academy. There are 2 campuses, so I'm in both campuses, and I am retiring this year. So it's been wonderful. My experience here in Utah. I came from New Jersey, and it's been wonderful. And I feel it's been very rewarding and to see the progress. I'm going to do all the things I wanted to do, join a book club, a garden club, and yoga. So that's my new thing.
Yes.
People are on. Go ahead.
Is it on? I'm Rebecca Oakey. I'm not sure that it's on.
It's on, but I think it's not picking up. But so you have to just
okay.
You like
I'll
your
try
big
and
person's voice.
Use a big person voice. I'm from Weber School District, and like many of you, wear many hats. I've been over the English language arts for our district. I'm working primarily with our K-3. Brought in the high quality preschool program in there, and I also work with the EL program, so Title III as well. And I just love how it all blends together. So it's been exciting to watch all of that, to be able to take the knowledge from here into those other areas and help support it across curriculum. And I've learned a lot from all of you. This next year, just kind of thinking of what's lying ahead, I've accepted a principalship, so I'll be over a Title I school. And so
Good for you.
It's been great to be out there, kind of feet in both places, which has been really, I need some therapy if you're offering that. I'll take you up on that.
Okay.
To try and manage some of those issues that come up in both places. Just the other day, I was looking at some data that the teacher there, the EL teacher, was sharing with me, and to be able to look at the progress these students are making, and to know that I'll have that direct impact is exciting. So that's kind of my background.
Thanks, Rebecca.
I'm Rhonda Bickhorn. I'm a teacher specialist at Ogden School District, and one of the really wonderful things that have happened just this last week when we got our scores back, we have a 4th grade team that's been working very hard on their speaking, the speaking abilities of their ELs, and so they said, well, how do I get, they wanted some data on that from last year, so I quickly did up some data, and it showed how that their levels 1, 2s, and 3s were down, and their 4s and 5s were up by quite a bit, that their students got. And the coolest thing was when I sent that to that teacher, she says, oh, my team has got around the computer, and we're just all geeking out, and we're just so happy about our numbers. And so that really was a great boost for me.
That's wonderful. So invite me to come and hang out with your team.
My name is Sandra Jolovich-Motes, and I'm the Executive Director for Equity and Access for Ogden School District. I get the great fortune to work with Rhonda. And I'm glad that she shared that. That's one small example. We've seen an exciting paradigm shift in our district this year, where several sites with several examples in which the entire site has been focusing on deep data dives with our ELL students and seeing what they can do. We have a science teacher that is blowing, district-wide, 7th grade, that's blowing it off of the charts, including her ELLs. So not just her non-ELLs, but her ELLs. And we're very excited. Our newcomers program, we've had it for a while, but we're starting to see some really good things from it, and we've chosen to expand it. And in fact, we had a huge celebration just recently, and it was the largest amount of parents that had shown up before. All the principals came, the teachers, even additional teachers came to support the families, where we provided them a really great meal and certificates. And what was the highlight is all of our students had made a video with their teachers where they shared a story in English about how their experience has been and what it has meant to them. And not to leave out our Native American population, we just recently had for the first time a celebration to recognize all of their achievements, but also our graduating seniors. And we partnered with Davis School District. We went to Weber State and had a formal celebration. And we're so excited to announce that all of our high schools, and if you know Ogden District, our Ogden High School is very traditional in what happens at their graduation. All of our schools came together and will permit next week our Native American seniors who earned the graduation a Native American sash that they get to wear to celebrate both their academic achievement and their culture. So we're really proud of that. So we're seeing a big shift, and we're excited to be a part of that.
Great, thank you.
Good morning. I'm Connie Ziegler, and I'm a ESL coordinator in Davis School District. And I've had the unique opportunity to work in an elementary school, and in addition to being an ESL coordinator. And I just really appreciative to all of our teachers, our paraprofessionals that work with the ELLs. We just graduated about 50 teachers that completed their ESL endorsement. We celebrated our Latino in Action students last week who did an awesome job this year, peer tutoring in our elementary schools. And I was just talking to one of my colleagues. She's an ESL coordinator at the secondary level, and she mentors one of the ESL teachers that went through the program this year, and she went and observed his classroom in the junior high, and she says he's one of the most phenomenal math teachers that she's ever observed. So I'm excited to see the teachers and how they're working with our ELLs in the district.
Thanks, Connie.
Good morning. I'm Betty Jimenez. I'm the ALS District Coordinator for Salt Lake City School District. One of the transformative things that's been going on in our district is we have a new director. And so we're working collaboratively trying to get our schools, primarily secondary, to understand that we just cannot continue shoving our kids into ESL classes just because of their WIDA score. So Sandra's drafted up a plan, and I don't know if she's going to share that, but anyway, that's one of my successes for this school year.
So good morning. I'm Sandra Buendia, Director over ALS Services in Salt Lake City School District. And a couple things, I guess, to celebrate is, and I will attribute the personal trek toward successfully balancing life is our conversations that we have. And so as a result of, just kind of what we're doing here today, right, I am working with experts to help me better understand exercise and diet in my life, to help feel energized. And so that's been really transformative in terms of my energy level and stamina with the demands of this job. So, and then the other piece is getting to work with Betty again. We've known each other for quite a while in Salt Lake District, but getting to work collaboratively to be transformative because issues related to English learners in Salt Lake School District have unfortunately been a back burner, topic, and we are, front and center now, and are excited, for the level of support that we're receiving from our superintendent and cabinet. And so a lot of exciting things happening, high expectations, and hopefully we'll continue to see our ELs exiting, higher and higher every year.
Great, thank you. So I hope listening to everybody has given you a sense of the level of commitment of people in this room and their connections to the communities that they create in the district. So I'm just going to make a couple of comments. One is we had this really great conversation with Carl in the dual immersion language program and the people in San Juan. And now in an attempt to maintain the heritage language of Navajo, we're having a specific seal that's the Utah seal, which all of you have access to. And then there's one that's the tribal seal that is across 3 states. So this year, I think we actually have 6 young Navajo. They're not necessarily seniors because you can get the biliteracy seal, whenever. It doesn't have to be when you're a senior. So the movement toward maintaining heritage languages in relationship to tribal nations in Utah is getting much stronger. So that piece is really important. The other thing is the new research on dual language learners in preschool. I'll send you, I think I sent a link to you, but I'm going to send a link. It's really important that this idea of forcing kids to forget their culture and their heritage is just generally, there's no research to that at all. It's like counter to that. I'm working with someone who just finished her master's, and she did this amazing research study on the Nepalese, actually it's the Bhutanese community who developed the Nepalese language, heritage language program. And when she did interviews with the kids from Nepal, they talked about this whole idea of being connected to their grandparents and to their generations and to their family. And the title of her master's thesis was a quote from a student who said, "Now we will not disappear." So I'm giving you these concrete examples of research that's connected to the kind of practices that you can feel comfortable in saying, this is an important value. The other thing is, kids really aren't at risk. It's the conditions that the adults have created that put them at risk. Right? So instead of using descriptors to describe children, it's really about the conditions of risk. It's just like all the research related to innovations in the 21st century with Scott Page. Okay, the only way innovation happens is if you have a group of people who come from diverse language as well as worldview perspectives, because having a room full of the same kind of people who are thinking in the same way, you're actually going to get solutions that are actually the same. And I don't know, we could say, look where that's gotten us. Is not all that positive. And there's research that's related to that. The peer tutoring, the other thing I think we should actually think about is we should think about creating a network to learn from each other in relationship to practices for newcomers. We might want to convene a summit at Tumaini. One of the things that I was so impressed with, and they're very careful about creating segregative environments because you realize that's an OCR issue, right? Even though I know some people think that it isn't, and it's just their opinion that, we should segregate kids. I know people won't confess to that, but, there is this tendency to think that you don't have to be accountable if you have, separate classes and, you don't really have to know who the learners are. Okay, so that piece I think would be important. One of the things that I heard when I was on the Granite monitoring visit, and we're going to alleviate people's anxieties about having a team come and visit you all. You shouldn't be anxious at all. Well, maybe we can hear from Charlene and Sandra about that when we get down to that section. The issue ends up being really helping feel competent in relationship to how they're working with who the learners are instead of all their assumptions about the learner. Okay, so that's on you all. You have to really think strategically about building the capacity of teachers not to be anxious, because some of the behavior that I end up hearing that's reported to me often in very disturbing contexts, the things that come out of adult mouths, the mouths of adults, is not really helpful for kids in relationship to their anxiety about who they think they are as learners. This is not a good thing. But part of that comes from their own anxiety about not knowing and feeling competent about working successfully with English learners. And that's on us, right? That's what we have to focus on. So thank you for the people who are talking about, these exemplary practices with the 7th grade science teacher, with the effectiveness of ESL endorsements. We can't have ESL endorsements that don't make a difference in the classroom and that are sheerly theoretical. And they do it because, it's a requirement for a district, but it doesn't make a lick of difference in their classroom. We'll talk about that too. Okay, so let's look at the agenda and the status of ESSA. So I don't want you to freak out about this, because I'm really happy that you all had access to WIDA scores, because guess who didn't? I didn't. I had to actually beg several people, and then because I'm actually on the WIDA board. So because I'm on the WIDA board, then I ended up getting access to the actual WIDA scores on a secure server. So the issue around ESSA was that the Title III adjustments ended up happening because Title I was not approved. So this is like the third time we've submitted the Title I plan, because now Title III accountability is now in Title I, and accountability for English learners is now a part of the state accountability and the grading system. So even though I've warned you for the last 2 years that this was going to happen, people are finally getting that it is going to happen. So if any school has 10 English learners, that's going to be, and they're not making progress, that's going to be weighted into your actual school grade. So this whole thing about paying attention to every learner and understanding who the learners are instead of making assumptions about them and their families is like this really great opportunity for us. So I want us to think about it as a great opportunity to really learn. Now I'm going to give you the latest version. Thanks. Okay, so I don't know how I'm going to do all of this, but whatever. So these are people who are now online. Hello, people who are online. You have to raise your hand if you're. Can we actually? Are they going to interact with us with a question? Do we know? Okay, nothing's working. So people online, just make a list of all your questions and then send them to me. Okay. So, are you ready for this? So this is the third version of the EL indicator for federal and state accountability, because the last 3 times it wasn't accepted. So on May 4th, I worked with the data and statistics people, and I'm going to tell you the method that we actually used. So one of the reasons it wasn't accepted the other times was, first of all, number one, we didn't use our own data. So we didn't do any empirical studies in relationship to what the trajectory for ELs in our state, what that would look like. Okay. Because for some strange reason, people wanted to be vague because it was going to end up in the state accountability system. So then it ended up not working because it didn't get approved, right? So then what happened is they sent it back again and said, okay, you're not really connecting the trajectory in relationship to the variables. Your method is fine, but you still haven't come up with a trajectory for English learners in relationship to your actual data. And you have to actually say not only how you did that, but also how you're going to identify annual indicators of progress in relationship to a long-term, which is 2022, goal that is ambitious. Now, it's not like the No Child Left Behind kind of weird nonsense that said 100% of students. So, it's not that. It's really looking at us, as a state and our students. That's the advantage. But I'm just going to say that it's challenging because last year there were over 40,528 WIDA assessments in 2017, and only 1.7% of those students were actually reclassified as English proficient. Okay, so that's not good enough, right? The point is, if we're not working on their English language proficiency, then they don't have access to academic content. That's the point, right? And so they're segregated into these low expectation classes that end up being actually humiliating. And I'm just going to say it because of focus groups with kids. Some from Park City, from East, from Ogden, from West, Cottonwood, they end up being shamed and humiliated because the expectations are so low. Oh, this is too hard for you. You can't be in this class. So it's a combination of all these things that end up being demeaning for kids. And so the way in which they think about themselves as learners is not motivating. Right. And to that end, we're actually going to look at the data for the kids who dropped out, who dropped out last year in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade. The percentages. Because if now we have state legislators and the most conservative saying that they're going to make a commitment to us, then we have to be clear. And this isn't about being mean-spirited. This is just about being clear and direct. Is every single kid in Utah going to have a future? And how are the adults going to make sure? Right. And this is not about blaming people. This is about quality feedback in relationship to really disseminating promising practices and doing good work for kids. That's what it's really about. Okay. So before I give this to you, I'm going to switch it a little bit, and I'm going to turn it over to both Sandra and, and you can jump in too. It's about the monitoring visit and the way it's redesigned. When we first did this at Park City, pretty much I got the idea from that because it was such a great experience, because they invited me in. Because typically this idea of monitoring has become very weird. It's like people get terrified because they think it's an audit and they're going to get blamed and blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's not it. Okay, so I'm just going to say, I'm going to give it to Charlene. So Charlene, do you want to say what the experience was like, and then maybe the follow-up from the superintendent? And
Sure.
Then you can, and the other thing too is there are people who come with me who, for whatever reason, they want to be peer reviewers, and usually they come with me and they visit classrooms. So Sandra did that this time because Salt Lake is up in September for theirs. And her anxiety was high. So she'll be clear about that. And the reason I'm doing this is really important for people to hear about it and for you to understand what that experience is. It's not about being audited and blamed. It's not about that. Okay, Charlene?
Thank you. So those of you around the table who have known us we've been here for many years, know that Granite School District has been part of the federal Title III monitoring visits, when the feds would come out, unlike our friends in Alpine who seem to manage to dodge that. Pun. Anyway. So we've had that experience where, you have the federal government coming in, and of course the state office folks are there, but it's really run by the federal people that are coming in. So having that anxiety or that experience is like, what is this going to be like? But I have to say, I've really enjoyed the process. One, of course, Christelle had sent out previously communications to us to give us an idea of what to expect, but you still wonder what's going to happen. But then what was really great is that Christelle actually spent, 3 or 4 hours, I think, in my office, just, coaching, mentoring, letting me know exactly what they were going to be doing, so that to the point of scheduling, what schools we would go to and thinking about, because we had to produce numbers and, which network would we go to. And so there was discussion on that. And so it really was very collaborative. And, if I had told Christelle no, that I'd rather do this other one, I'm sure she would have agreed to that as well. But we came up with working with our Cottonwood Network because of the large number of refugees and the practices and the things that we were doing there, which would definitely be a benefit to others in the state because of the large number of refugee students and their families. So that was a great experience to be able to at least have that pre-meeting so that we knew what was happening. And then worked with our team, got the principals on board, our administration, and our teacher specialist as well in our department. What was really unique about this that has never happened in the past, yes, there's been classroom observations, maybe 1 or 2 schools in the past when they've come to audit. However, this time it was really intense. But intense in a good way, because it's really getting at the crux of how is our training and our experience and our knowledge and background in working with ELS being transmitted to the teacher in the classroom. And that's where it's going to make the biggest difference, is what's actually happening. What are the best practices in that classroom to help our ELS? And so in this case, every school, we had 5 schools, Cottonwood High School, Granite Park Junior, Moss Elementary, Lincoln Elementary, and Roosevelt. And each of those schools had a team. They had somebody from my department that would be there. We also had a content specialist from USBE there as well as content specialists from Granite School District. Now, we try to work closely with our curriculum department, but this experience even solidified the fact that we need to be working even closer and collaborating more so that we're aligning and our strategies, and we're understanding what each other is doing. And so I just think there's a lot of great things that have come out of this. So there were commendations that were given, and thank you for the commendations. And there were also
waiting for others to join.
Yeah. And there were also
I did, it doesn't work.
So, and there were also some recommendations. Along with, before I go on with that piece, on each day, it actually took place over a period of 3 days. Is that 3 days? Or I don't know, 4 days. It was a whole, just a blur of that.
Your audio has been muted. Press *6 to unmute your audio.
And so during the day, there would be opportunities for this team of observers to go into the schools. It's really interesting. You see the personalities of the principals. Our principal, Milton Collins, brand new from Arizona, who did a turnaround, who was a principal of a turnaround school, had some great results. He is one of those principals that he wanted to make sure that he was there, very visible. His teachers are used to the fact that he's in their classrooms every single day for a period. And it's really evident when you're with them and shadowing them, what practices are there all day long. Anyway, and then in the afternoons, or at about 3:30ish or whatever, we met with different parent groups. And so Christelle had an opportunity to really interview them. And watching Christelle is really masterful in that she just sits right across from them, and it's just eye to eye, very close and very sincere, and talking with them and finding out, what really motivates them, why are they here, how is it beneficial.
Sound again.
So we had we had those opportunities, and the last day we also had all of the administrators.
It's a state meeting, and if they expect us to get information and it doesn't work, how do we get the information? Then you can record it, but it's 3.5 hours long. So when do the rest of us have 3.5 hours?
Saying. What you're saying.
They have good intentions, but if you can't get it to work,
oh my goodness!
And it's such an important meeting for the whole state of Utah. Yeah, it's just
really important.
Yeah, it's important.
Can't hear anything.
We only do it 2 or 3 times a year. And the local people, the 12 sticky streets that live Salt Lake the whole drive, but people who are.
Go ahead.
It'd probably if you had someone to go.
Okay.
Colonel and Duchesne. I used to go, but it was all day long. They fed us
For
lunch.
all the administrators to come.
Stop doing
With our superintendent, our assistant superintendent, and some other invited district folks. And that was so we were able to sit down with Christelle, and she shared some of what her visit was about. And then from that, then she went around and asked each one of the administrators what their about their input or recommendations, or what is one thing that you would like to see happen. It's really interesting though, as I reflect back on that conversation with the administrators, they didn't really talk about anything ESL, but more about their concerns with behavior, which would go back to that mindfulness and some of those other things. And so it was, but bottom line is, I think everybody felt valued, and that that they definitely were contributors to this experience. Following up with that,
that's good to know.
The superintendent
and I could drop my van off and then just catch a ride home.
has been very supportive of the findings or the letter. Christelle sent out a letter very detailed about and very thankful about the experience, and identified commendations and then recommendations for each school.
You won't be here to bug me.
So what our district is doing with that right now.
It's more me bugging you.
We are.
Say it.
We are.
Say it. No.
Each school has their set of recommendations, commendations, and recommendations, and the superintendent has instructed each director who's over the principal to work together with their team to address how they're going to come up with a plan for addressing the recommendations. And so those are trickling in right now. And so at the district level, when they submit that, we're going to be working with the curriculum department as well to address them. And then after we formalize that and designate how we're going to be helping the schools, we'll then submit that to Christelle as a response. So if you understood everything I said above all of the noise, bottom line, for those of you that are looking forward to doing it in the next year or two, it really is a good experience. We're learning a lot from it, but more importantly, I think out of all the monitoring visits, and we've had several, I feel that this is the one that will really get to the most meaningful, because it'll get right down to the teachers and what's best for kids.
Okay, thanks. And sorry about all the confusion. So we're going to have Sandra talk about her experience, and then we can open up to questions. So Sandra was a peer reviewer, and she can talk about that experience. And then I'll talk about when we did the report, we also we identified promising practices, and now to disseminate and upscale. So now we have a really close collaboration with Granite, as well as some of the other places that we went to have a promising practices website, which again happens to coincide with this new enthusiasm in the state legislature. I mean, I don't know how that happened, but I mean, it is interesting. So do you want to talk about your experience?
So I was fortunate enough to be invited to be a peer reviewer, and how cool was it for me to go to, a school district that is serving similar demographics and facing similar challenges as Salt Lake on a larger scale. So with that said, I have to be honest and say that I really walked away with a lot of information that I could then share with Betty and with my department, and think about how we apply what's working well in Granite School District. And I visited Granite Park, right? Okay, making sure I say, I've been calling it the wrong thing. But so anyway, just really impressed with how student-centered it was, how high expectations were embedded in everything that they do every minute of the day. I mean, I just walked away and felt like if Granite can do it on this scale, there's no reason why Salt Lake can't do it. And so I told Charlene that I'm going to be, taking advantage of our proximity, and just kind of picking your brain, because I'd like to, continue to do our work and definitely build upon what Granite's model is. So I'm excited about that. In addition to that, of course, is lessening my anxiety, because I was freaking out a bit. You should read probably all the text that I sent Christelle, thinking through what does a monitoring visit look like in Salt Lake District, and then being able to become familiar with the tool, the HES observation tool. Really, I've already shared it with the network that we're going to be visiting, and it's like, this is your way of doing a self-assessment with your school, with your ELD programs and departments, to identify what you're doing well related to this rubric and what maybe you have to address, and we're available to support you. So it was a positive experience. I'm looking forward to doing it again. Still some anxiety about having, to be the site visited, but I do know from our conversation after the fact that it was very thoughtful and really focused on providing meaningful information. It's not a gotcha. So I appreciated that. So thanks for letting me be a peer reviewer, and Christelle, thank you for inviting me to participate.
So the underlying assumption is that if we're all learners together, then quality feedback is important at whatever level. Okay, so do you want me to say that again? Quality feedback and the ability to actually receive it and act upon it is what a learner is. It's not about being right or making somebody wrong. It's not about that. So that's the way in which we do our work with a level of integrity. As well as when I wrote it in the ESSA plan, because the peer reviewers said, how is the state agency actually going to support the LEAs in making sure that ELs, not ELLs, remember? So it's English learners, not English language learners. English learners have access to academic content. How is the state agency going to make sure that happens in classrooms? So when I worked with the team here, which now everybody wants to be on the team, which is fun, right? And so everybody here is saying, people from special ed, from teaching and learning, we had content specialists there. We're having special ed people, having the director of teaching and learning who is a math specialist. So we have all these people here who now are thinking completely differently about their work in relationship to curriculum and standards and quote-unquote regular education classes. And that was because the peer reviewers to the Title III plan said, so how are you going to be responsible? It's your responsibility to provide the kind of feedback and support that's going to help LEAs in schools, in classrooms, with making content accessible. And that was the framing inquiry question. How are teachers making academic content comprehensible to English learners? That's the question. That's what the ESSA peer reviewers said to us. Because otherwise, kids will not have a future. They're reclassified as English proficient, and then what happens? They're low expectations, and then they don't even have access to early college coursework. So what is that? That's like, I don't know, kind of scandalous. Okay, so questions just about that? Yes. Question. You have to use a microphone.
When Charlene mentioned that administrators were involved, I just wondered who they were, which administrators.
So it would be the administrator, the principal at each of the schools, our associate director who's over, superintendent who's over me. The superintendent knew about everything, and he attended a lot of our meetings. And then our teaching and learning department. They were the main ones. However, the report was shared with all directors. the final report that Christelle gave, so that everybody could look at it and know what was the recommendations, commendations, and recommendations.
And that was actually a model that we used at Park City. We met with the superintendent and then all the principals, and that was kind of one level. Because then, you meet with parents and you meet with teachers, and, the way in which the most relevant feedback can be given to the leadership. See, that's the point. If you create safe conditions for principals and kind of set the context for them to be honest and straightforward about what they need, it's a much better environment than principals being unhappy and then never saying anything. I mean, that's kind of crazy. You see what I'm saying? So everything that we do is just incredibly intentional in relationship to the conditions you create for the kind of dialogue that matters for students. It's not about making the adults feel comfortable. It's not about that. It's about believing in their integrity as educators and creating opportunities for each educator, whether you're a superintendent or whether you're someone at the front office, to actually learn how to adapt your practices to make schools welcoming environments. That's all it's about, right? Okay, any other questions about the monitoring visits? And on the agenda, we kind of skipped around, but I'm going to actually give you the third version of the EL indicator in Title I. Okay, so you ready for this? Okay, remember, it hasn't been approved yet. This was just submitted. This was just submitted on May 4th. So when things are submitted and we get feedback, it's really an incredible practice for me to be a kind person, because I must be speaking Greek. I mean, I don't know what it is, but, when I go to someone and say, okay, well, this actually isn't accepted again, and this is what they're asking. Okay, so let me cut and paste and send it to you so you can see what they're asking. Okay, so let's talk about, about why you're not why you still don't get this. So you might have to share. I mean, I hope everyone has a copy. Okay, you ready? For the people that are online, if you're still online, we'll send it out. Okay, if you look at the question, so I think what we're going to do is I'm just going to read the question, and then you all get together in pairs and look at the responses, look at how we responded, and then we'll be open to questions. So here's the question. Describe the long-term goals for English learners for increases in the percentage, the percentage of such students making progress in achieving English language proficiency, as measured by the statewide English language proficiency assessment, WEDA, including baseline data and state, not school. I don't know how many times I have to say to this people. State, determined timeline, trajectory, right? Timeline for students to achieve English language proficiency, and how the long-term goals are ambitious. We can't have kids who come to us in kindergarten and they're English learners in high school. What are we thinking? I mean, I don't know if we're thinking anything, but that is just not acceptable. Okay, so shall I just read it and then you guys talk about it and then, okay. So long-term goals were established based on a grade level. Okay, now you should underline things if you're not, you have to be really clear, because when you go back and you start talking to people about it, you have to actually understand how the analysis was done. Based on a grade level analysis of 2016 rates for reclassifications as English proficient determined by achieving a 5 composite score as measured by performance on the WEDA World Class, blah, blah, blah. The method of analysis used 2 factors to identify a trajectory: toward becoming English proficient within 5 years. The student's age and the level of English proficiency at the time they entered Utah's educational system. Okay, so those were the two variables. Okay, you see the importance of the variables, right? It's like the grade they entered and what proficiency level they were when they entered Utah's schools. Okay. Then it says, based on that data and consultation across the SEA with feedback from selected LEAs, the student grouping for monitoring growth have been designated as 3 grade bands. In the previous submission, the grade band was elementary combined with middle, and then just high school. Okay, so that tended to be a little problematic if you think about kids entering the, at the elementary level in kindergarten. Okay, so then it says the grade bands are grade K through 3 to align with state literacy initiatives and dual language programs. Okay, we just can't have the state legislature pouring billions and billions of dollars into K-3 reading initiatives that have no impact on ELs. You have to go back and say that. You can't like roll over and have literacy and curriculum people tell you what's best for ELs, and they have millions and millions and millions of dollars, and there's no way that they're working in relationship to who the ELs are. Okay, I'm getting a little passionate because this probably, maybe it doesn't happen in your districts, but it often happens. Grade 4-7 to support the effective and innovative transitions from elementary to middle. When we looked at the data and saw the gap in proficiencies from kids going to elementary to middle, it was like 30 points. It was like really horrible. So here you have elementary kids, and you know this for a fact, and then they go to middle school, and then they, not to mention they're like early adolescent, and then they're like totally lost. Grade 8-11 to focus resources on Utah's refugee and immigrant student populations who often enter into Utah schools at the secondary level, and English learners with special needs, as well as an effective transition to high school. When I give you the handout and you look at what happens with the dropout rate at 9th grade, you should be nauseous. This is like not acceptable. Kids tell me, the teachers in high school, all they do is talk at you. They talk at you. Anyway, I should probably send you, but without any names, the transcripts from the high school students. If you saw what over 120, 130 high school kids told me about how they're actually treated in high schools, you would be horrified. Grade 8-11. Okay, so then English learners with special needs as well as an effective transition to high school. These long-term goals are ambitious because the analysis to determine the trajectory range from 2 years to 7 years, and the decision to use 5 years as an expected timeline for English proficiency was set by the Utah's Data and Statistics Department in consultation with Federal Programs Department. So provide the measurements for, so then they're asking us to provide the measurements for interim growth towards long-term. So you see the long-term goal for K3, 4-7, 8-11, and then on the back, you can actually look at how the data were modeled in a trajectory. Now, people tend to freak out, so I just want to make sure that you know that the progress, if you look at the bottom, it's adequate progress toward ELP is defined as either achieving a score that is 0.4 proficiency levels higher than the previous year's score, or achieving proficiency of 5 or greater. And then they talk about the methodology. Okay, so it's 0.4. So they're comparing, what each individual student had the year before, and looking at growth by a 0.4 in relationship to individual students, wherever the individual student is. So then what ends up happening is you'll get, again, a letter from me, or we'll send something out. It's like AMAO 1 and 2, right? And then for Title III, it's also for growth toward increased language arts. Okay, just wait a second. Language arts and mathematics and science. So it's very similar to AMAO 1, which was the growth, AMAO 2, which is increased language proficiency by a 5, right? And then academic growth on the whatever, I don't know, whatever replaces SAGE, right? Because it's mathematics and English language arts. Okay, so we don't know that. Okay, questions. I hope this is alleviating your anxiety. Yeah.
I just have a clarifying question. So when looking at the data from our kids that got a 5, if they were 4.7 last year and they got a 5, on one of the columns it says, did student make growth? And it says no. And it's because it wasn't a 0.4. Is that going to stay the same? I mean, because then we're getting.
Idea. I have no idea.
Okay.
So I'm not going to do the statistics. I'm not going to be doing any of that. The only issue in some ways you have to worry about is if they're a 5, then they're going to be reclassified as English proficient, right? And you're going to be monitoring them for 4 years. So shall I say this again? Because someone just asked me this again. Okay, and I think I've been saying it for 2 years. Okay, you're going to monitor students for 4 years. So your data system has to you have to go to your data people and to your curriculum people and everybody else and say, okay, so for 4 years, we're making sure that kids who have been classified as proficient aren't falling behind when academic content gets more challenging, right? Because that ends up being the point. They're reclassified, but then, academic content is more challenging. So what does that mean for instruction? Okay, the teachers who are teaching those courses have to actually do something differently. They can't talk at kids and give them textbooks. Okay, other questions?
So can I just follow up on it? Because I guess one of the things that we want to know is who do we let know? Because based on the statement that's here, consistent with Utah's long-term goals, and I'm not going to, it's either achieving a score that is 0.4 growth, right? Or they score the 5, right?
Yeah.
And so when it comes up and it's color-coded red, but the student has achieved, so I guess there's a disconnect, at least for this year's scores and reporting. So right now, we do have students who achieve proficiency, and yes, we're going to create that exit plan and monitor for 4 years, right? But ultimately, in whatever report comes out of, the accountability report, it's almost like a disconnect between this statement and what the color coding is from the WIDA results.
Well, a couple things. Number one is remember that it's state accountability designated by the state. And the second thing is, remember, so the feds haven't approved this yet. We just sent this on May 4th. Again.
So this statement's new.
Well, so all of it's new.
Okay.
But the 0.4 isn't new, right? But the way in which it's organized based on the empirical data is new, because that's what they criticized. So we don't know what they're going to say. So just to be clear, but I'm the kind of person who actually wants to be transparent, and I want you to know what's going on. Like, I don't want to keep this from you. Do you know what I mean? And then at the last minute, you're in your first year of warning for school improvement. So I don't think that's a good thing. So other questions? Yeah.
So when I talked with our data person about the 0.4, that will not get a student to a 5 in 5 years. That would take 10 years. Yeah. So
So, okay, so I'll just say this again. When I worked with the accountability system and the data and statistics people and checked this 50 million times, on May 3rd and May 4th, and tried to, and communicated this with them, I said, are you sure this is correct? Are you sure this is correct? So, because they're going to figure out the accountability issues, we just have to bring these questions up to them.
Okay.
If, in fact, this is approved. We don't know if it's going to be. Okay. You realize I'm tap dancing as fast as I can between, trying to get WEDA results and then trying to work with the data institute. So I'll just say one other thing that's just a fact. The data and statistics department is separate in this agency from the assessment department. They separated it because they wanted the data and statistics people to be under Scott Jones, who's under finance. So it's not connected to the assessment department. So I'm not going to make any judgments about that. I'm just going to say that that adds another layer of complexity. Get it? Without me saying anything more? Okay, other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. As our team looked at this and read through it, I asked for their feedback. So I'm just going to bring this to you, Christelle, realizing that if I don't ask this, they'll be upset with me. So
remember, you can ask any question
I
you
know.
want.
On the baseline for 2016, the number, what's shown there, the question that came up in our discussion was they felt that the reconfiguration had actually taken place in 2017 assessment. So shouldn't we be using that baseline instead?
No, because 2016 was actually when wasn't that when the scores went down? It was 2017?
Yeah.
Okay, well, they used 2016, so I don't know what to say.
Okay, well, I'm glad I brought it up because that was a big discussion yesterday. Like, no, that's when we experienced the low scores and everything. So,
thank you.
I just have one question.
Yeah.
I know when we look at student growth, like on the USOE or USDE report, we're looking at the scale score, and here we're looking at proficiency level. Just a question about that for individual students and growth, because I understood scale score went across grade level, and you could see growth in that, but not necessarily to look at the proficiency level to measure growth across grade levels. So just a clarification on that.
Yeah, well, I can't actually clarify because I actually agree with you. One of the things that we did in the data gateway is use the scaled scores. But the way WEDA uses it is they use the proficiency scores. You see, so there is a disconnect, and we have to figure out in relationship to that because I was analyzing, now that I finally got access to it, I was analyzing the differences in the actual student report and the way in which the data gateway does, which ends up, I think, in some ways being more helpful. But the trick is to align it so we're all talking the same thing. But again, if you look at the work that we've done with assessment and data and the data gateway, the goal is to actually have an EL data gateway dashboard that would just be focused on EL indicators. Now, that's a bigger motivation now because it's a part of accountability. Do you know what I mean? Even though I was promised that last year, but now, because next year, this coming year, it'll have to be a part of that, then that data dashboard will resolve all these issues. That's why your feedback is really important, to make sure that the data dashboard provides us with the EL data that's the most important for to help your teachers do instruction. Right? The point is about the instruction. Right. I mean, I know teachers still who have I always ask them, so you're using the the individual student reports. And they say, what? They don't have access to them. They don't use them. Like, whose responsibility is that to help them? Shouldn't the principals know, like, the individual student reports working with the EL kids? I mean, I don't know. It's just a question. Okay, other questions before we go on to another happy thing about the internal audit?
Yeah, I had a question. So one of the variables that we used is the level of English proficiency at the time they entered Utah's education system. How will schools be held accountable as well as districts for students who transfer in on their 5th year in the Utah educational system? So we had a student that transferred in this year. He's been at EL for 6 years now, and he just passed the ESL test. So will that reflect badly on our school, even though we've only had him for a year in our ESL program? Or if a student were to transfer in or transfer out of our school and pass in another school, how will those results be divvied between the two schools? Like saying that the success was at this school who the student transferred in versus another. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, but I have no answers to any of those questions because, again, this is not approved. We haven't even gone through the first year of the accountability system where you're actually going to get data related to accountability. So we don't even know yet.
Okay.
If I could make those decisions, I would, but I have no control over the kinds of decisions that are going to be made in Title I for accountability. Usually I'm the last person they bring in. Only because they, generally the questions I ask people haven't thought about. Part of it is because, you guys are helping me think about questions, right? You're the ones who are helping me. Okay, what else? Anything else? Yeah, you're going to be stressed out about it, but I think the biggest thing is not to be so stressed out about it. It hasn't been approved. We're trying to figure this out. All these questions are important. I'll bring up these questions. And I think the other thing is the next time we have a meeting, we're going to bring the data people in here and the assessment people. So they're in the same room. And then they can answer all your questions. Right? How about that? Should we do that in September? Okay, great.
I have a question, Christelle.
Sure.
On the first page, that first paragraph that's not bolded.
Yeah.
It says the two factors will be the student's age and the level of English proficiency. Right. Is the student's age actually the grade cluster?
It says established on grade level. So it's the grade level. So when it says, because I actually have they showed me the data and it was done by grade. So they have the student age and the level of proficiency, but what they mean by students, they mean
age.
They mean the grade. The grade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why we did kindergarten. So when the kids come in at kindergarten. Right. So the way the graph looks, it has all the grade levels. And then they use the mean and then the best case scenario and then the worst case scenario. And talk about heartburn. And because it was based on our data. And so, it wasn't a happy day for me when I saw the data, actually. Okay, do you want to just go on or do you want to take a break? Do you have other questions? You have to be resilient, but you have to be transparent with people at the district. Right. You can't, they have to know. You can't keep this to yourself. You have to talk to the people at the district so they understand what's going on. Because it's going to impact, right, your schools and their grades. Okay? All right. Okay, so let's look at the next thing. Apparently, we're not connected now because it's too confusing to people who want to talk to us and then are mad because they don't have the technology or whatever. So look at the status of school fees. And I put the link there. Okay, so if you remember last year, and this is just on your agenda. So last year, the resettlement agencies kept on giving me these invoices from schools that were charging refugee kids and poor kids outrageous amounts of money, which is against, so can I say this again? Against the permanent injunction for 25 years against Utah schools. Okay, so then when we started investigating this, we saw this as a practice. You don't pay the fees, you can't register, you can't pay the fees, you don't get a diploma, which is against board rule. I mean, just this endless, heart-wrenching kind of thing about you know, if you're not middle class or upper middle class and you can deal with fees, then if you're poor, if you're an English learner, if you're a refugee student, then you're disadvantaged. Okay, so not good. So then we went to the licensing department, or we went to the board. We brought up all these issues because it was time for the school fees board rule to be rewritten, right? Which was loosely constructed so that districts could either cover up that they were charging kids or use charging fees as punishment or like, I don't know, whatever. Okay, so then the audit came out. So they said, let's do an audit. And they did an audit, and then I put the link here. And so this is their findings. This is the internal audit. And remember, USBE internal audit is totally different from USBE. They're located here, but they're the internal audit department. So that's why they have some level of integrity, because they're not enmeshed with, if you know what I mean. So they may not be the most, popular department at USBE, but they do great work. So we identified a recurring lack of governance and administration in the state and LEA levels related to 14 findings and 2 observations. Based on our findings, we believe that there's a high level of noncompliance with current school fee and fee waiver policy, resulting in an unreasonable system of fees, which jeopardizes, you can underline this, equal opportunity for all students by limiting access to school programs, both curricular, extracurricular, based on a student's ability to pay. Okay, we're not like other totalitarian countries where we don't value every individual student. Okay, right? Okay, so then our policies have to represent that. USBE's response to the findings, and I just highlighted it because you can actually go to the website and look at it. You would go to the internal audit report, and then you would click on that. So you would click on that link, the URL, and it would go right to it. So in Appendix B, there are principles governing school fees, and I didn't give you the separate document because you can read it. My recommendation is that you would go to principles governing school fee, because I'm assuming that we want to be principled educators that have a commitment to all children. You make copies of it and you give it to everybody in the district. Appendix E, sample results. It's a separate document. When you have some schools charging $1,500 for cheerleading, you should wonder about that. The scope of a task force as corrective action. So this is what the letter from the Utah State Board to the audit. We initially concur with the audit's findings, observations, causes, and effects. The task force on school fees may, as it commences work, develop exceptions to the audit that will articulate corrective action. The USBE will direct the task force on school fees to recommend. And then it gives a list, and most of those come actually from the permanent injunction. So you can see that now there's a task force being constructed, and their work, they just ended up finishing a contract with a facilitator, an outside facilitator. The task force composition was left to Board Chair Huntsman, a committee of 15 on the task force, to dig into the audit, the injunction, the abuses. If you read the audit or you saw the newspaper article, $17 million was collected in fees just last year. Okay. So questions about the destiny of school fees? Yeah.
Does the task force have a deadline?
Yes. Yeah, the deadline, of course, I wanted to make it like 3 months so we could actually get on it. And the other thing you should know is that in July, the Attorney General's office for the legislative audit, they're doing another separate audit on fees, which I actually think is going to be even probably more horrifying than what we saw with this one. So they have organized it so that the task force will be meeting, and they think the final recommendations and report will be like next January. So they've contracted with a facilitator who's very skillful, and she's actually facilitated like high political task force before with the governor's office on students with disabilities, which ends up being a big issue. So we have someone who's outside the agency, right, who's very skillful. And just so you know, after every single task force meeting within 24 hours, all the notes will be written up, given to the facilitator, and the facilitator within 48 hours will then send a report in relationship to the progress. So I just want you to know that there's a really systematic way of holding the task force accountable in relationship to decisions. So what other questions do you have?
I don't know that I have a question, but I've spent lots of hours in the last couple of weeks with schools, with students that, okay, you're not going to be able to graduate or you're not going to be able to walk because you have missed your junior year or your sophomore year of school fees, and they're still hanging over their head.
They can't do that. That's illegal.
I'm meeting with those people. It has been extremely frustrating to get them to understand, look, this student has been identified in our power school system as either immigrant or migrant or ESL or homeless or whatever. Doesn't the thought appear to you to check with these kids before that school year has ended that they can waive those fees and the year, because it's documented where those kids sit and what they do? And I'll tell you, I've gone to battle with some of our people and our registrars saying, no, they'll have to do this or they'll have to do that or they'll have to do this. And I'm frustrated, but I'm angry about it because these kids they've worked so hard to graduate, get into their senior year and find out, well, you're not going to be able to walk because you haven't paid this blasted school fee. Sorry for whoever, if they're hearing out there, but I'm passionate about this. Our kids work really hard.
But you realize that in the board rule, I mean, it's even in the board rule.
And when I went to our people at the district level, they said a principal can waive any student's fees any time they want. So I get principals who back me. It's the dang registrar who sits in the office. And I'm going, talk with your principal. They say that these fees can be waived. And they should be. They should be. So I'm so glad for this audit, to be real honest with you guys. I'm really glad this audit has taken place and really showing what we're doing to some of our disadvantaged children, because they deserve their right to be able to walk and to graduate and be an example to their other siblings and parents. So enough said. Sorry, I'm just...
No, so this actually, this is so typical because it represents these concrete experiences that impact the lives of children and families. You cannot say in Utah that we value family life and then do this. I mean, it's just inconsistent with the kind of rhetoric that we use in relationship to lauding values in Utah. If you value family, it's all families, right? So do you want me to come up with you?
No. I think I have the support of principals. It's getting that down to where they're saying to the others, no, you will not demand that. And when it says in here in the new things that's coming out, alternatives in lieu of fee waivers or fee waiver alternatives, should they have to fill out another form to say this is where our income was 2 years prior to that, when it's been documented that for all the years they were in high school, as a matter of fact, they were in that category. You know, we document that every year. It's not like, okay, once you're migrant for the next 10 years, or once you're immigrant for the next 10 years. It's documented there every single year. And I said, what's the thing about you going and saying to, looking at that year that they're there and checking Power School? And I had one lady said, well, I only use this program. And I said, excuse me, you have access to Power School where it's all in there and documented for this student. They shouldn't be carrying fees over from one year to the next when they were eligible that year for fee waivers.
So I don't know if this will be helpful, but spending the last 5 years at East High as one of the assistant principals there, we had, and it was a large administrative team. And so maybe at the end of the year, I mean, I'm glad there's a lot of past practice that needs to be improved upon at East High as well. But I will say maybe this can help. You know, if you're able to, because it was just such a volume, you know, if you can imagine a school, you know, of 2,000 kids, and I know a lot of you have schools that are even larger, but the last month prior to graduation, you have an influx, right? And so one of the things we did to try to expedite the process was just, you know, because we had the authority to do so as APs as well, not just the principal, is I might suggest that if you can come up with a list for every one of those high schools of the students and just get approval, a blanket approval from either the principal or an assistant principal. It doesn't have to be the principal. It can be an assistant principal. And just submit it with the signatures, then, you know, the principal can deal with the insubordination of the registrar, because that's insubordination, you know, and hopefully, because those students are deserving, if they have the credits that they've earned to graduate, there's no reason, I would agree, there's no reason for them not to walk. And so that would be my suggestion.
Yes,
listen to some radio stations, that those radio stations could inform the parents about these fee waivers. And that way the parents are educated, so when they go to the registrar and they tell them this, they can say, no, I heard on the radio stated by law I can go to the Board of Education and report you. And I think after that, they would, with my parents at school, I told about these fee waivers. And I'm constantly hearing, oh, thank you, because I know money at the high school. I did not know about this.
So the other thing is, and I don't know if you know this, but I'm not sure if I sent it to you, but the permanent injunction is probably the most stellar legal argument about shaming students that I've ever read in my entire life. And in 1992 or 4, this board, not this particular board, but the board then, they submitted forms to be used and posters and that you could do in every single language to make sure that families knew their rights, right? And then that disappeared for some weird reason. Okay, so that's the other point. When I work in focus groups, you know, parents come back and they say to me, Can you come back and teach us about our civil rights? I just think how sad that is. They go to a school and the school is not in any way honoring their civil rights. Why is that? I mean, that's just like incomprehensible to me, frankly. It's the same thing with, you know, the whole point of who is supervising people at the front office to create a welcoming environment, who's supervising the counselors, who end up saying, not all counselors, but some counselors, the most horrifying, egregious things to poor students, refugees, and immigrants. Who's supervising them? I want to know.
And it goes down to the people also who are involved with being in charge of those programs that does fees. My daughter came home and told me when she was in Madrigals, like 5 years ago, that her choir director said, and please don't use your fee waivers for the dresses, because then we won't have the money we need. So he made it sound like those kids were causing a problem for everyone in the class. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, but you realize that happens all the time.
Yeah, in all the kind. Yeah. So I don't. So it's not just the top people.
That's right.
It's also the
Well, this one parent said my child did not not playing football because we couldn't have the money. And I was like, oh my goodness, I think he goes to Cypress or Hunter, one of those are sending high school. I was like, I cannot believe that this is happening. So I'm like, tell your friends, tell people at church. But I think if we would have this in the radio stations, the federal, I forgot that what the mission was. But whenever there was a law, my sister was an attorney for them. She would go throughout the country and to all the Spanish stations, informing them of this new law. So I think if we did that here,
well, we can't do it, but you can do it. It wouldn't be an issue. I mean, I'll actually send out, I don't know. This was like 2 years ago when I gave you the civil rights of English learners. And I know that people who actually took it to teachers and provided the civil rights of English learners, the poor people who did that, I think Jerry was one of them. I was one of them who went with a group of teachers. They were ready to lynch us. Right? Same thing with course-taking patterns. They were ready to,
on one hand, they were ready to lynch, but on the other, to have it so specifically spelled out was quite invigorating to some.
So that's probably the other thing. I could send it out again. Yeah. And you have to evaluate the way in which you're following the civil rights of English learners. You can't, it's not like, this is like not an option. It's not about your opinion.
Well, and I think it's an opportunity for us as districts to make sure that we truly systematically provide the PD to everyone.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you just think it's common sense and you'll provide PD for some and you think then, like for the example, the principal has your support, but his or her practice isn't speaking the action of their support to you in your situation. Because if they were truly systematically supporting that, they would make sure that they provide the same PD to their registrar and everything and the understanding. So I think we have to make sure that we have that systematic, not to forget coaches, employed coaches and volunteer coaches, everything. You have to go from all the different levels. And if you put that into place, then if you have examples of violations, then that's a whole different situation and you take different action because you first made sure everyone was aware and had the knowledge that they needed to have.
Yeah,
and make the appropriate actions. So I think a lot of mistakes are just because of ignorance or lack of training.
Yeah,
I'd like to think.
Well, I agree. I mean, when people say, yes, I'm glad I know this now, ultimately the question is, okay, so you know it, but what's your behavior in relationship to it and how our policies changed to ensure that that doesn't keep happening? That's ultimately the question.
It goes back to action and behavior in the system.
Yeah. The next, so just to add to maybe your stress level, I'm just trying to make you warriors, right? You just need to be warriors. The early college committee, they're going to be revising the board rule so that everyone has access to early college courses with no convoluted pretend prerequisites that teachers, counselors, principals create to keep kids out of early college coursework. You can't do that. And that's actually a civil right. It's like number 8 that talks about access to early college coursework. So, but we have conveniently ensured that our kids don't have that, right? Okay, so do you want to look at the grants management system? We're on 3.0. The new application and self-monitoring tool. So the new grants management system. Part of it is it's not ready, but for Title III and some of the federal programs, it's ready. But then it's not connected to base, so they can't get the new system connected to the base system that generates the grants. So this is So this is the solution. And I've given you lots of time to do this. And when I do my monitoring visit, the self-monitoring tool is a way to keep yourselves accountable. And if you need a really great example of a self-monitoring tool with all the links and everything, Granite has a really great one. Nebo, in their DMI, they have a really good one that's focused on that. But you can't actually say that you're compliant and then you don't have you haven't listed any evidence. Just to be clear, you have to have evidence to show that you're actually following the law. Okay. So the Title III is no longer using DMI, not to mention because it's a dinosaur of a system and no one can figure out how to do it. I can't even figure out how to get it in because the application and self-assessment tool along with the USBE report after monitoring will be used for the federal audit. So over the summer, I'm going to transfer all the DMI documents that you have into the USB hard drive folder, which is monitoring. So that's where the Granite self-assessment and all their work is. We scanned all of yours, Park City, your monitoring tool and all your evidence, we scanned that in, and so that's in there for 2017. We'll scan yours and put it in there. So you'll have an electronic copy, which you have, and then you'll actually have that, and you'll put the monitoring report with it, and then how you responded to it, and then you'll upload it to the UCA, so that's how the grant, the application of funds, is going to happen. I'm going to give you, again, a hard copy of that. So here's the application. Wait, I'll give you the.
Where will it be uploaded to what?
It's going to actually be uploaded to the US. See where it says the hard drive on the USB-E hard drive monitoring? It's going to be in federal programs in SAS. So, if I end up dying tomorrow, then, it'll be there for everybody. Nobody will have to worry about, where did Christelle put those binders? Which is what I had to do when I came in. Binders of stuff. Okay, so I'm going to give you this application. I've done webinars. I've handed it to you. I've emailed it to you. But now it's the rubber hits the road kind of thing. So here's the actual application for Title III based on ESSA. And it's really simple. You'll love it. So do you have other question? So I'm trying to do everything electronically, right? So then there's sustainability and continuity. So that you'll have the electronic portfolio copy. It'll be here in SAS in Title III on the USB hard drive based on. So the way it looks is it has district and then it has Granite and then it has 2018 and it has all their documents. Then it has Park City folder 2017. It has their self-assessment and all their documents. You see, so then everybody will have access to it electronically. Nobody will have to be worried about it. We have to eliminate stress, right? We don't want to be stressed out. Okay, so do you want to look at the assurances first? So on the back page where it says assurances, you know how like every grant application has assurances? Because if you're actually taking money, you're saying you're going to do this. If you don't want to do this, then don't take the money. Okay, so, and this has already been approved as the application, just so you know. So here's federal law. The LEA provides effective language instruction programs, elementary and secondary, that meet the needs of English learners and demonstrate success for each English learner by meeting interim and long-term growth goals by each school as articulated in the ESSA State Plan for English Language Proficiency and Academic Subjects. Comes right out of the law. So if people say, we can't do that, okay, then don't take the money. We'll give it to somebody else. And remember, it's only supplemental funding. Now, so shall I explain why it's supplemental funding? It's supplemental funding because in the 1960 legislation with LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, now recognized as one of the most influential presidents of the top 10, because the war on poverty was about supplemental funding to ensure that poor children, right, and other disenfranchised groups had supplemental funds to ensure that educational fees that are supposed to support their civil rights would be insured. So this whole thing about I don't have enough money, Title III doesn't give me enough money. Okay, I want people to stop saying that to me. And the reason is it's a fundamental obligation to provide a high quality education to every student, whether they're an English learner or not. This Title III supplemental funding is only that, it's supplemental. Your obligation, right, for an English learner comes from your funds. Okay. So sometimes people get confused because they come to me and they say, you know, Title III is not enough money to have a program. I'm thinking, okay, so that's a problem. And the fact that they actually say it to me is probably a bigger problem, right? So, and I'm kind to them generally. Okay, so the LEA provides effective professional development designed to improve instruction and assessment of English learners and is effective. So this is right from the law, right? Now, you're actually marking that you know this. These are the assurances that you know the law and that you're going to accept the money, and this is what you know. Okay, it's right from the law. The LEA's language instruction educational programs are staffed with appropriately licensed and certified endorsed teachers. This is even in Utah rule. People who come and they keep saying to me, you know, well, it's almost like we grab this person off the street and they're going to be the person who's in charge of EL. Okay, so, and like they have no idea what they're doing. The LEAs has a process to ensure special education services to English learners with identified qualifying disabilities through the school's individualized program team articulated in special ed. Okay, we can't just have people saying things like, "Oh, well, we're gonna wait until until this student is assessed as English proficient before we look at special needs." Okay, you can't do that. So I'm just trying to be as clear as possible. I'm not being. I'm just saying from my experience, you just have to be clear. It's not blaming. If you know, then you can't do the same things you've always done. The LEA follows the entrance, exit, and four-year monitoring procedures as outlined in the state plan. The LEA ensures internal controls, policies, processes, and procedures are implemented to effectively use resources, supplement, not supplant, at the school level to support the purposes of the grant. So the purpose of the grant for Title III is increased outcomes for English learners. It's not spending money on, like, you know, toy cars for kids because English learners aren't motivated. So buy them a car. Buy them a little car. Okay, you think I'm making this stuff up? I'm not making this stuff up. Okay. And you can't take it so seriously that you're upset about it. You have to actually be clear about it and then do something about it, right? The LEA ensures that no student is denied the opportunity to participate in a class or school-sponsored activity because of the inability to pay a fee. This is in Utah State Code. The LEA understands its legal obligations of the Educational Opportunities Act of 1974 and the Joint Guidance for Civil Rights, which I talked to you about, to overcome language barriers that impede English learners from participating equally in state and LEA educational programs. The LEA ensures that parents receive meaningful communication in a language they can understand. I don't want to hear stories about kids who are left waiting because the communication to the parents didn't work, and the school has no idea that the parents don't have phones, and they're going to call the police on a kindergarten kid. The LEA offers equitable services to eligible school students and eligible students' parents, teachers, and other educational personnel by initiating a consultation process with officials of private before the start of each school year. So you know this whole thing about, consultation with private schools, right? Okay.
So could we just make one announcement?
Sure.
Some information went out about the training for the new grants management system, and we just wanted to clarify. I just sent an email out because we've been inundated with emails this morning from our Title I directors. So I sent it to Title III directors.
Oh, good.
As well. The title programs are going to remain in the UCA this coming fiscal year, but the email that went out was somewhat confusing, and I know one of the directors had asked for clarification. She was told to come to the meeting on June 1st with the special ed directors, but that isn't accurate because that training is specific to special ed directors. Special ed will be in the new management system, but that training is specific to special ed. So unless you're also the special ed director for your LEA, you do not need to go to the June 1st training. And we'll be communicating with further updates, but we just wanted to make sure you advance.
So if you've already signed up for a space, who do we need to contact to take names?
I'm assuming Sarah Grisenti was the person.
What's the question?
She actually just said if they've already signed up, who do they let know that they won't be?
Oh, okay. So this is really weird that you come in at the same time that we're talking about the grants management system. That's like really weird. See, we have we're on the same wavelength.
And we will be doing another UCA training to update everybody, but we'll let you know as soon as we get that set.
I just thought the UCA was going away.
It is going away eventually.
One more year.
This is the ongoing saga of the grants management system. You can't even believe it. I don't know. Anyway, so actually you'll see this will be available for you in the UCA. Right. So this what we're going over right now, this will be available for you in the UCA, as well as your self-monitoring system, the self-assessment tool. Right. So because you'll upload that, the only thing you're going to upload in the UCA. Okay, listen. The only thing that you're going to upload in the UCA is this, which is your assurances, right? And then responses to these questions that I'll go over, and the self-assessment tool, right, with evidence for you, because you're assessing yourself. The tool is a mechanism for you to create evidence for your compliance, right? I mean, it's for you. But it's obvious if the feds, which they already started doing, say we're going to come and, audit you, that if you actually don't have your self-assessment tool and they randomly pick you, then that's not a good thing. So I'm providing you with those two things to help you be prepared in an electronic portfolio that will be kept here and that you should keep. So I'm like a long-term thinker, which means I'm very pragmatic. I think about like the worst case scenario and then try to go back and figure out how we can make sure that doesn't happen to us. Question.
When is the due date to upload for the application for Title III funds?
Yeah, typically what happens is it ends up being, is it like October 1st? November 1st, I think, because it has to be after the October 1 deadline. Right. And then the other thing that's interesting is, remember those allocations are always preliminary because then you have all these charter schools as well. And so then typically what happens is it ends up being less. And the other thing is that the current administration took $9 billion off of the Title I fund. So we're going to be so that's going to have you already know, it's right, it's had an impact on. Yeah. Well, it's not only that, it's that those initial funds are not available because the $9 billion is gone from Title I. It's not just about your own rates. Okay, so do you want to look at do you have any other, yeah.
So on the assurance number 9 for the language for the parents.
Yeah.
USB, we thank you guys for like providing such like home language surveys and what we need to ask, but they don't provide translations. So like we thankfully have a good team, myself included, Katina, and one of our office workers who translate the documents like home language survey into Spanish. But for some of our students, their home language is Arabic.
Okay, so I'll just say this: we have all those already translated. Okay, in all those languages, but we haven't uploaded them to the website because the Title III plan hasn't been approved.
Okay.
So we have all those documents translated because part of ESSA is you have to have a standardized form. You just can't have these forms that you just make up. You can have some that are differentiated based on your needs, but you have to ask the kinds of common questions that would be standardized so we can provide the kind of support that's necessary, because the data then is never correct. All right?
Done that. We've taken some of that since we're already registering and going through that for home language services specifically. So we've translated them, the meaning, obviously, as you translate, you don't translate word for word, but and so we have those for our parents. So if this is all updated and approved and we move forward, obviously we'll be using those in the future. But as for now, this is what we've used.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. If you don't have a plan approved, you can't very well put stuff up there. You have to actually wait till you get your plan approved. Even though I know Title III was approved, but the entire plan based on Title I was not approved. Okay. Okay, so let's just look at the application. It just says it comes right out of the law, and there are just 4 questions. Explain how your LEA is using data to evaluate the effectiveness of your language instruction program. Now, previously in the UCA, they used to do this is my own opinion, weird stuff where they'd say, list your materials. Like, so what? You're listing them, but we don't even know how you're using data to evaluate the effectiveness of your program. So we're not really supporting you in building your capacity to make good decisions. Okay, the second one is describe your evidence-based model for instruction and the curriculum materials, elementary and secondary, that are supplemental to those purchased with state and local funding. So then 3, explain how you allocate resources to individual schools to impact the school's increased success for English learners, specifically meeting annual growth goals toward English language proficiency and supporting increased academic achievement in mathematics, English language arts, and science. This includes the use of instructional coaches or school-based ELD support by those who are qualified. If a district gets, over $1 million in Title III funds, and they're not making any progress, and the way in which they allocate funds to the schools is not supporting the schools do the work they need, do you see my point? It's not logical. If a district is getting a certain amount of money and the ALS directors have no understanding of how that money is spent, it just doesn't make sense, right? So if you don't have access to your ALS budget and decisions are being made somewhere else and you have nothing to do with it, okay, so no, that can't happen, right? That's why you're here. Okay, and then list specific schools that did not meet the interim goals for ELs in state and federal accountability. Please explain how you will support them with a strategic reallocation of resources, that is people, materials, professional learning, and funds. Okay, the reason this is important is Title III funding goes, as a 24-month cycle. When you don't draw down your money and we're at a deadline and that money goes back to the federal government, it is humiliating. I'm just saying, this is not good. Right? And then you're not making progress for English learners, but you send money back. Okay, so remember, I'm saying these things because these are realities. I'm not making this up. Okay, any other questions? Do you want to ask me why I have so much energy? I'm in my 70s. I mean, I'm moving toward my 80s pretty quickly. Okay, any other questions? Now, here's the exciting part. How are we going to make sure that your business administrator is actually paying attention and working with you? You ready? I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. Now, the first year I came in here and I looked at outstanding balances for Title III, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. And I thought, oh my God. And I said, okay, so let me develop a plan for risk assessment. And they said, oh, well, we don't really do that. Okay, so then I find out that ALS people have no contact with the curriculum people, and they have no contact with the BAs, and the fiscal manager is spending their money from Title III in inappropriate ways, and the BA is not pulling down for reimbursements. And I'm thinking, okay, well, this is kind of ridiculous, right? That doesn't make any sense. Shouldn't we be working together? Okay, so now I'm going to give you time to talk about it, because guess what? It says the purpose is supporting the use of Title III funds effectively. One, for program evaluation. So I'm on actually the second page where it says grants management. And at the bottom it says an incentive to submit reimbursements. So it says Title III budget incentive to. So I've been on the phone and emailing people and saying, you realize that by June 30th, if you don't spend this money, if you don't draw it down and spend it, it's going back to the federal government. So do you think I'm happy when I do that? I'm generally kind, but I'm really stressed out. So the incentive to submit reimbursements. Okay, you ready for this? So the reason that we're creating a risk assessment pilot, it's a pilot, is for effective use of funds for program evaluation, adjusted practices for increased final decisions based on student data, economic decisions based on resources, use of student data for Title III grant application with completed self-assessment tool for monitoring. Now, here's the criteria for risk assessment, and then I'm going to let you talk about it and you can give me feedback. Then you can add other things to it. Now, remember, monitoring is very different in relationship to feedback for classroom instruction and program evaluation, right? Okay, this is a fiscal audit. This is plain and simple a fiscal audit. Criteria, and I taught economics in high school, so you don't want me doing a fiscal audit. Criteria for risk assessment, which triggers, so how Title III funds are used. Okay, number one, ESSA data showing no increase in student achievement in EL proficiency growth or academic achievement. Requests for reimbursements that are submitted by the LEA only once at the end of the fiscal year. This is like 24 months. This is like 2 years. Request for reimbursements from the next year's budget without spending the previous year's budget. What are you all thinking? Okay, you can't ask for 2018 reimbursements if you haven't spent 2017, right? Okay, now, a fiscal audit can be triggered by the risk assessment indicators and is connected to program monitoring related to addressing the needs of ELs. What are the learning needs, program evaluation, right? So it's connected in that way, right? Because if you're not making progress and you're using funds in a way that isn't supporting that, then we have to help you see how the way in which you're typically allocating funds isn't doing the job for English learners, right? So I want you to work with a partner and say, do you want to add more criteria for risk assessment? I want you all to think about you as an ALS director not having access to any kind of Title III funds, or somebody else having access for Title III funds, and you not even knowing that that money is going out of your budget to somebody else. So you think that doesn't happen? Oh, it happens. Right. So you see the point? We're trying to figure out how to really support you in using your expertise and be supported at the district level to use Title III funds effectively and not wait for 24 months to draw down. Shouldn't you be planning ahead of time, like how you're going to use funds? I mean, I don't know. It would seem logical. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to talk, and we're going to. So what do you think about these factors that triggers a fiscal audit, or should we add more? Okay. So turn around and talk to somebody. Oh, I know. Isn't that weird?
But then it's kind of sad.
Isn't it sad? How do people get so marginalized? And then who makes these people in control of all these finances and they have no connection with like kids?
I don't get it. And then I kind of wonder, like, at the superintendent's level, why aren't they aware?
How can they get so clueless so fast? I mean, I don't really understand it. Wouldn't you, like, if you were a superintendent, wouldn't you be on it?
Well, based on my personality, yes. Yeah.
You should probably stand up too and walk around if you haven't, and we'll come back in about 10 minutes. You know, it's really a sad, I don't know, it's a sad statement. And it's like you guys are out there by yourselves. It's like fighting these battles at these districts.
Well, we're dealing with something that just got rolled out by the
Don't tell me it's the Imagine Learning nonsense.
Lexia.
Lexia?
Our, and she, like, without, rolled out is to create an ELL class that.
What? No, you're kidding me.
Well, and I'm like, well, first of all, I mean, it's.
Well, you realize that, talk about an OCR field day. Does she know that?
Okay, I'm going to be nice and say she's frustrated. Yeah, you gave me a lot of ammunition to support our cause.
Like Jeanette.
They still don't get it.
That's the battle.
I mean, that's just
I don't think I can make it.
I get it all the time, but I ask about things. Oh, well, that's not there. And they will come in and pull you up. That's why you got it right now. Like I said, I would like to see
That's what he keeps telling me.
see or hear or in the decision-making process where and how we like to act. I'm going assistant superintendent and my assessment director tomorrow to show them how money should be allocated to the school, which is above me, and they spend on how it's going to meet their needs. And so I'm going to take them to a district that allocates money to the school. Let the school teams be responsible to keeping everybody else. And it's taking me 2 years to get the commitment to get them to go down with me tomorrow. And then unless they make the decision. I'm really excited about tomorrow. And I'm not in that. And I'm really looking forward to it. I'll be retired in January. So tomorrow, if they don't respond after 2 years of tell them you know, and then the political version of our state is much less and so we're going to because we're slow to choose. And so we're making that decision of where the money goes. And so where are ELs? So politically, who's getting there? Or your Title VI because the funds are going in. And so you know, civil rights, which are right now being that's so power and money is right above me. Sorry. On and on and on. Until I'm ready to retire. So when those kids gave me
Okay, so let's come back together. Oh, you know, do you want to come back together again? So here's one thing we could do to make this efficient. So did everybody pick up in the back like a feedback sheet? So everybody see your feedback sheet, so make sure that you have that. Because if you want to record something specifically in relationship to this criteria, you could also write it down there. Okay? So what do you think about this triggering a fiscal audit? You love it. So thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs up, okay. Two thumbs up. So, you know, there are ways that we can work together to solve these issues. We don't have to be like stumbling around, being in agony, not doing good work for kids because of whatever habitual patterns people get into. And it's not their fault. It just ends up being comforting to do the same thing you've always done, even though it might not work. So what are some of the things that you think that we could use as another criteria for a fiscal audit? I heard someone say that they were actually going to go to their, is it a BA? I don't know. Yeah, BA. And say what? How badly do you want a fiscal audit? Oh, here, that's a good line. How badly do you want a fiscal audit?
You know, Christelle, and for us, we think, all right, if you'll just give us time to get them trained on this, then we can add another one. But again, it's your business administrator, and it's just a constant, vigilant, what's on the budget now that's like a surprise.
Yeah. So are these 3 sufficient, or do you think we don't want to make it too complicated? You know, right? To start, it's a pilot. We just want to see how it's going to work. Because eventually when the new grants management system does get uploaded, and the new budgets and all that kind of stuff are in there, then it'll go directly to the BA and say, you know, I can't remember how it's set up, but they're actually notified that there's a deadline for a reimbursement request. Yeah. Oh. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to make it too complicated, but I wonder if somehow either under 2 or 3, you could add a hyperlink to the guidance you gave us of supplement versus supplant.
Oh, that's actually a good idea.
Just to make it, just so it's very accessible to them and they don't have to go elsewhere to find it.
Yeah, no, I think that is a really good idea. Because the other thing is, I think all the federal programs now have combined it to a supplemental, not supplant. So it's easy then. It'll be easy for the business administrator to see, as well as goes back to this idea of training people. Because, you know, once the commitment is, you know, this is a way to really have an impact in relationship to using resources more effectively so that we see increased gains for students. You know, if you just say it that way, it's not accusatory, but you're just talking about how you're aligning resources to have an impact on students, right? That's the point. And this is just a way to help that happen. So that's a really good idea. Anything else that you think?
I have no idea how the system works because we're kept completely separate from that department. But is there a way that a signature or some acknowledgement from the Title III director could be included? Mm-hmm. I always feel awkward when I go to talk with business services and they're submitting things that I feel they're on my behalf, but I didn't get much say in it or zip say in it.
You know, I think this is good because hasn't Salt Lake kind of mitigated that with, you know, the business? Do you want to say how that happened?
That was earlier in the year, right?
Yeah. So I think it was an issue about funding for ELD coaches, but you had no.
Yeah, and I'm still working out the logistics of, you know, having that personnel perhaps reassigned to the right person. However, so a couple things that were happening, not probably any different than what you're experiencing. Everybody else is making decisions, but you're the one signing off on the assurances. And so then what I did was go and talk to, and it took a level of confidence because, you know, our business admin is our superintendent's cabinet, you know, so I went and talked to our business administrator as well as the accounting department and, you know, essentially said, if my name is on the line and you're going to hold me accountable for fiduciary responsibilities, then I need to be the one who sees everything and approve or deny. And so now we have the system where anything and everything comes by me, whether it's a Visa purchase, a purchase on Visa, or personnel compensation. I have to review it, and it's been a very difficult change for a lot of people. So
Wow.
Well, and in Ogden School District, that is our practice. Oh, I'm sorry. In Ogden School District, that always has been our practice. Our business, our BA in our office doesn't sign off on it until the budget executive director or director signs off on everything. And it's actually my secretary that initiates the request for reimbursement in this case, and it just takes a while to get it done. We just have to keep asking and asking, but everything always goes through.
And that's the same
The
thing in
program
Granite School
first.
District. You know, they have to send it to us. We review it. Is the money being spent that way? Blah, blah, blah. But it goes back to even the planned spending. I hope you're part of planned spending so that you can put in that data from the beginning.
Yeah, I think that's an important piece. The other thing that we might want to do later on, as a part of the pilot, is to use, like, identify exemplary practices. Do you know what I mean? And say, you know, this is a district that has, you know, not only fiduciary responsibility in relationship to focusing resources that make the most difference related to student outcomes. See, when you start talking that way, then it changes the conversation and people don't get so defensive.
Well, and in addition, we have one school plan template for all of our schools. We braid the funds, and then I bring together all of our budget secretaries with each individual principal 3 times a year, and more if needed. And we go over all of their school plan goals, where they're at, all the different funding sources, and we braid that.
So the reason I think we used this idea about braided funding, again, because it goes back to this idea of the difference between supplemental funding and then other sources of funds. Because if you're actually more strategic about that, then it's a part of the education process. Then you don't have people saying, well, we don't have enough money to have a language program or what, you know, stuff like that. So it's just a way to really think positively as, you know, kind of a foundation for having a common moral purpose related to students. You know, you can't really say that you're focusing on students, but your practices and policies don't actually represent that. Okay, anything else? So you think those 3 are fine? We'll put the hyperlink in there, and then maybe some exemplary practices. I'll send something out with just a couple questions, and we can include that as well, so that you'll actually see, people can see different ways that people do it so that there's some kind of level of accountability. Okay, let's go on to the next thing. If you look at the top where it says, I think we're on page 3, it says feedback from Granite. So we pretty much have already talked about that. For September, Annalise is going to be the peer reviewer. October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, I'm going to Entheos, and that's still open for anybody who wants to be a peer reviewer. You can just email me. Canyons is 23, 24, 25. Nancy Ward's going to be the peer reviewer. Jordan, 13th, 14th, and 15th. That's open for anybody who wants to be a peer reviewer. The other ones I'm scheduling, if you notice the way in which I'm scheduling charter schools, it depends on if they have like one site, right, or 2 sites, because I know Entheos has 2 sites. So I might be bringing a couple of teaching and learning people with me. But I always meet with the person, with the ALS Title III person ahead of time for the scheduling and all of that kind of stuff. So you shouldn't be anxious about that. I take care of all that. We go over the tool, and then we debrief. Like I'm going to meet with Charlene and after all their responses come in, right? And then we're going to go over how the schools responded to the recommendations. And I want you to know that Superintendent Bates was just extraordinary. He wrote the most amazing response to the report, being just incredibly thankful for the recommendations and charting a future for them to become more, focused on the work that they want to do with the level of quality and integrity. And then we designated specific practices for dissemination, the school-based mindfulness, the Granite Peak High AVID demonstration site. So the new Utah's Promising Practices website will actually be the portal for disseminating all the promising practices. Hillcrest, I think their biology code, their team teaching will do that. Ecker Middle School, their mentoring program, and then content link courses at Park City High School. So we're trying to frame this idea that here we're recognizing Utah's promising practices. And these are the ways in which the superintendent, the principal, the teams are organizing their leadership to ensure successful practices for English learners. We'll also, the biliteracy seal, I think Alpine actually was the district that had the highest percentage in the pilot program of Spanish speakers. So the whole emphasis on heritage language from the very beginning, instead of you can't be speaking that language at home, instead of that kind of attitude. So we're going to be focusing on exemplary practices related to biliteracy as well. So I just want to thank all of you for being so wonderful, and a shout out to Superintendent Bates for being a visionary in relationship to disseminating his. I saw some of the best work I've ever seen, well, in several schools, but with refugee parents learning English in the community learning, the actual center, because they have school-based learning communities where the families come and they bring their kids, because the kids, then there's like a nursery or there's childcare right next to them, and then the work that they're doing when we videotape it, and I haven't told you this, but I'm doing a session on ESL practices for adult learning. So I'm going to go to, his name is Milton, right? I'm going to go to Milton and make a connection with the refugee mothers, especially the one who was the grandmother. The intergenerational stuff that you see happening in with elderly Arabic-speaking parents and then their children and then their grandchildren is like the most wonderful thing. So if you ever want to come with me just to see what they're actually doing with their families, you should come, because it's like really wonderful. Okay, so the promising practices, Park City. Okay, so we still have some time. Here's this issue about evaluating the effectiveness of ESL endorsements from various universities. Okay, we can't have people going through all these theoretical programs and then they go to the classroom and they don't really know what they're doing. Okay, this isn't good, really. We're wasting their time, and it just doesn't make a difference. So there are a couple of changes that people have made in the way they think about ESL endorsements. I know Davis for a long time has really focused on the work that they do specifically, and they have their own program. So we're trying to make the ESL endorsement a way that highlights the context of the district and how they want to support, right? So your program is approved. There are lots of programs that are approved. And then there's this orientation about a competency-based approach where you still have to have the required credits for the ESL endorsement, because that's an agreement with all the universities, because you realize there's lots of politics related to that. So I'm not going to talk about that. But anyway, but there's also this level of, if you're developing a teacher portfolio and they develop their own learning plan in relationship to what they need based on who the learners are in their classroom, that you'd think that that would increase their ability to adjust their instruction in a more relevant way, right? Instead of very generalized, abstract, theoretical things. So we actually do have permission from the states, from not necessarily the board, but the state superintendency here, to begin to design a competency-based ESL endorsement that would actually be designed for a specific LEA, very much like the work that Davis has done with their district. So does anyone want to share I'm thinking about Annalise because they work with the University of Utah and have made some significant changes. The big issue is universities, and I work with the universities, they have to actually change. They can't keep doing the same thing over and over again, and they can't keep using the same research, right? Like over and over again. It's like, packaging a lesson plan and using it for 30 years. Okay, you can't really do that. So, Annalise, do you want to talk about how you worked with the University of Utah to change a little bit? And anybody else is doing anything innovative, you should feel free. This is giving you ideas.
So, and I'm not sure how other partnerships work, but the way that we've worked with the Department of Education, Culture, and Society at the University of Utah, they really came together with us and we built the program from the ground up. So we had several meetings over a long period of time, and every course was vetted through the lens of the district, meaning that every course has been built using the WIDA standards as the framework, as well as the TESOL standards and what the state requires. So every course is built based on specific standards that address the course content. And so we have the 18 credit hours built over 6 courses, from the multicultural course to the practicum. And we work with the UITE department to give us the last 2 courses for the field hours. But in addition to that, we have built field hours in every course. So then it's not just at the end or completion of all of these courses where you've gotten all this theory, but we have really complemented theory and praxis, in every course with some field hours building up to the culmination of their practicum. In addition to that, we also weave the family and school partnership course. So it's not just an 8-week course, but it's built the modules are built throughout the year. So every course has a module that includes a component of family engagement in relation to the content of that course. So that's how we built this so far. In terms of the logistics, we learn every year. we get input from teachers and trying to make it doable for them. So this next year, we're going to be moving into our 3rd year of our partnership. And we learned that for teachers to make this doable for teachers, we are doing the first 2 courses in the summertime. So then their 3rd course won't happen until October. So then they have the first 2 months of the school year to get ready for, the new year and so forth. Another thing we've done is that every course is a hybrid course. So the instructor determines how many times the content really drives the face-to-face classes, and then the rest of the work is done online. And so that's another way that we've made it doable. And again, it's not where we want to be yet. Every year we adjust according to the feedback of the teachers to really make it doable. The other really attractive thing to teachers is that for the 18 credit hours, we pay that out of pocket. And if they want to continue to complete a 30-hour master's degree, then they pay the remaining of that. So it's also a subsidized master's degree that they get from the University of Utah, which has been very attractive to our teachers. In essence, our teachers have not paid more than, it ranges with the inflation of, university credit hours. We anticipate that this year teachers will not pay more than $11,000 for an entire master's degree, a 30-hour master's degree. So those are some of the things that we keep working with the university. What I like about the partnership the most is that we are involved and part of the conversation every step of the way, and we vet every decision they want to make sure that we are in agreement and it's not just them making these decisions of what's best for our teachers.
Okay, and how many masters? So you ended up, did you say 10 masters? 10?
So our first year, we had 10 of our teachers completed the master's degree, which they just walked last the first week of May.
That's wonderful.
Our second cohort will be going into the last half, the last 12 credit hours this summer and the fall, and then they'll finish in December. And we have about 11 teachers completing the second cohort for the master's degree. And this summer, June 12th, we'll start our third cohort.
Okay, so that's one model based on a really interactive, mutually responsive relationship with the district and a university. Sometimes that doesn't happen. Okay,
We're working with SUU, and they've let us choose whether our courses are blended or online. And so of our 6 courses, 4 of them are online, and 2 of them are blended. And we have 2 in the summer that are all online. And their model also has they're doing practicum through every course except those 2 ones in the summer because there's nothing to do practicum in those 2. We did not know, but one of our teachers found out that you can also do the same thing at SUU and get a master's degree, and they'll count those 18 credits, and it's a master's of education degree.
Okay, great. And that's another thing to put on the Promising Practices website, because the more we disseminate practices that make a difference, the more people are interconnected and not feel so isolated and, trying to figure it out themselves.
Okay, I just have a quick question because you sent out the flyer for the University of Utah. I have a lot of teachers who are very interested in that from our area in Cache. We've been unsuccessful in developing a similar type program with the university that's really close to us. So I'm okay in my teachers from Cache signing up for that program and paying the fees and following through until we get on where we can develop something that's closer to us, because really what you've set up fits what we're doing in Cache as well with TESOL and WIDA, and that's so the program outline and what looks there is just what we want already. We'd love to have it in Cache County, but so far not able. So in the meantime, while we're working on that, we are okay to do the U of U.
Yeah, so let me, go ahead.
So I will have to ask them if they accept teachers outside of Canyon School District, because right now the partnership and the MOU is just with our district.
I think she's talking about something different.
Oh, something different.
She's talking about what I sent out.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
Okay,
I'm talking about what Christelle sent out, not just with what Canyon has made arrangements with U of U, but the other. So.
Okay. So let me tell you what I'm working with the University of Utah. So it's a 6 credit, but it's in a cohort, and some people are coming as teams, and it's based on this model that I've just sent out to you. So if you look at this, it's a competency-based approach. So did everyone have a copy? Did everyone pass it down? Does everyone have a copy? Okay, so this might be a little confusing because I'm actually doing 2 different things at once. So, and the reason I'm doing it this way is that this superintendency approved a competency-based approach to the ESL endorsement. And it's based on the TESOL standards, like every ESL endorsement. It's demonstrated competency through an individual or group, grade level, or vertical team, and it's an evidence-based electronic portfolio based on the K-12 competency rubric of the TESOL standards with teacher self-assessment goal setting for professional growth. So if you look at it, the evidence for each of the competencies, you have language, culture, instruction, assessment, professionalism through parent. The practicum, which on the endorsement, the actual way it was approved is a separate one. But there are universities like UVU, BYU, U of U that integrate the practicum into all the other courses, which makes sense. So required a portfolio exhibition protocol assessed on a 4-point calibrated rubric with a local panel, school administrator, designated district representative, preferably the ALS specialist, the same grade level teacher, optional but recommended recommendation of the local school board. The list of LE educators who have approved by the local panel, the school district, not me. So you see how this is different? The local panel submitted to the USBE licensing with the rubric and documentation sent to USBE and scanned. Then that person would be awarded, based on competency, would actually be awarded an ESL endorsement. Now, the next steps are this. It would be possible sources of evidence for each domain, right? Because when you have an actual portfolio, you're using evidence to show your competency. And then a criteria for demonstrated competency based on the rubric for each domain. Now, in the TESOL standards, and then a protocol for the exhibition and emphasis on examining student work produced by a capstone project at the end. Now, I put in the framework. This is the framework for all universities who are accredited to actually do an ESL endorsement course. This is from the TESOL NCATE program standards. So this is what Annalise is talking about. These are the program standards. These are based on the domains. So the 5 domains in relationship to language, culture, planning, implementation, assessment, and professionalism. All right, so those are the actual standards and domains. The organization of the standards, if you look on the next page, it says they're organized around the 5 domains, and then they're performance indicators that you can meet based on 3 levels of proficiency. So you either approach the standard, you meet the standard, or you exceed the standard. So the goal, I'm actually meeting with, originally we thought we'd do it at Park City, but then there was some, I don't know what happened, some kind of issues, whatever, it's fine. But now I think because charter schools know that the alternative language services and English learner accountability is in the state report card. So they've been calling me frantically to figure out how they can support their teachers in working with English learners, which is a good thing, right? So I'm meeting with, I met with Monticello, and then I'm meeting with the Ascent Academies. And I'm meeting with 6 teachers at the Ascent Academy. They're opening another one. We'll take this framework and they'll actually focus on, based on their vision of their school and the goals of accountability, like what lines of evidence would they use for each domain and standard. Then they would assess themselves and set an actual goal for their own learning related to their students' progress. So you see the point? See it's organized in relationship to what the teacher needs based on their self-assessment related to what the students are producing. It's not somebody imagining what teachers need and then creating professional development that teachers hate because it's not immediately relevant. If it's not immediately relevant, so we do know that the basic principle of adult learning is if it's not immediately relevant for the adult will do weird stuff like walk out or, I don't know, look at their computer or get angry or like whatever. Adult learners are very different in some ways. Yeah.
So with this program, in 6 credits, they can have their ESL endorsement
No.
rather than the 18.
No, they only get a certificate for advanced teaching because this is actually obviously more challenging than going to courses and doing like jumping through the hoops. But these 6 credits then would actually apply for the 6 credits for the ESL endorsement. Because remember, the ESL endorsement is based on the agreements with the university related to the TESOL standards.
Right.
And we're not changing what the universities are doing. We're just providing another opportunity, right, for teachers to really better understand who the learners are in their classroom instead of what a, now I've always worked in universities. I have friends who are university professors, blah, blah, blah. This is not about talking smack against universities. That's not my point, right? But you have to be actually connected to what's going on in schools if it's going to make an impact on who the adult learners are, who are actually accountable for what's going on in the classroom. If you have professors who are so far removed from that, you know, I don't know, it ends up being challenging.
That's one of the reasons why we like our program.
Is because our teachers are all teachers. The
Right.
instructors for our courses
That's right.
are all teachers.
That's right. And that's the way it is in Salt Lake because they've adopted all the syllabi that we developed at USBE when we didn't have any money to keep doing it. So Salt Lake does the same thing. They have people who are teachers who actually understand what's going on in the classroom.
So granted, also, we only have one professor because he runs a program. He feels like he needs to teach the class, but the rest are teachers as well. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah.
Okay. Question on this. If teachers come and they take and get the 6 credits, does that make them qualified then to like teach an ESL class? For example,
Well, part of it is because they actually get from the University of Utah a certificate for advanced teaching.
Okay.
Of ESL.
Yeah, because what I've got is I've got some math teachers, you know, at the high schools who are focusing and working with second language students to help them, you know, understand those math concepts and move forward. But that meets the requirement, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, they don't actually have the ESL endorsement as defined in relationship to the university standards, right? But remember, the point of this is helping teachers actually look at their students' work and adjust their instruction based on how they're learning who the learner is, not their ideas about who the learners are. So I don't know how many times I can say that.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? For those districts that currently have OCR cases open and agreements with them, we would still be bound by the agreements. So even though they had the certificate,
right?
You know, if in an agreement they state they need an ESL endorsement, we're bound by that agreement, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Just
So
want to make sure.
You're always bound by OCR agreements. You're always bound by the IEP team and the goals for the students. You can't say things like, well, can we substitute this because the IEP team, you know, is an English learner, but we don't really know anything about language acquisition. Okay, so no, you can't really do that. If kids deserve dual services, right, then the team has to know what they're doing. They just can't like substitute and make it up. Like, you know, what people say to me, oh, good literacy instruction is just good literacy instruction. Okay, no. The needs of English learners are different because the principles of language acquisition are different. You're not teaching them the alphabet. Sorry, this is like, I've seen this happen and it's really horrifying. You know, you have refugee kids and they're in this room and somebody's teaching them the alphabet. I have no idea what that's about, but anyway. Okay, anything else? I'm just trying to create options in the ESL endorsement that is more relevant to the actual practice of teachers and not something manufactured by universities, as good as they are and as nice as they are. Yeah. Okay, so here's the absolute last thing. We're not going to look at it because I want to end up on a high note about, flexibility and all these wonderful possibilities. This is the single year dropout rate report, and it's run by grade, it's run by student group, it's run by year, it's run by district, it's run by charter school. And if you see the number of EL kids who drop out at the 9th grade, we have a lot of good work to do. Just say it that way. Right? So I'm just going to hand this out to you with my blessing. And then you can stay behind if you want to have any other conversations. I've never been accused of being shy, even though I actually really am shy. This is just a persona that I take on. I'd rather be somewhere in the Himalayas in a hermitage, instead of here. But I'm not there. So anyway, that's all I want to say. Okay, so you make my day and my year when I look forward to it. We'll get the technology and the dates straightened out. We're going to meet 4 times next year because the implementation of ESSA is going to be huge. And then I'm doing lots of webinars related to using data effectively. And I might invite some of you to join me because that's always fun down in the recording studio. We can sign autographs afterward and something like that. Okay? So, all right. And the explanation, the single rate, year dropout grade. And the reason I think this is important for us to pay attention to is there's all kinds of interesting ways to remain deluded, which is the PR people will say, oh, we're so excited, our state graduation rate is now at, 85% or something, and that was because English learners made progress. And I'm thinking, okay, well, if you look at the aggregate level and you frame it that way, it hides other issues, right? And, the worst symptom of inaction is lack of clarity. If you're not clear, and you love to live in chaos, then you don't have to take any action. If you're clear, then you can actually say, oh, well, look at this. Let's work together and figure out how we can make a difference for the kids who, get into 9th grade, and then after the first quarter have all Fs, and then people wonder why they drop out. And just a reminder, I've been having this conversation with high school principals for 20 years. So it's the same conversation, different groups of students. Well, it's actually the same group of students, but different generation, multiple generation of kids. Yeah, it's kind of hidden. That's the thing that's so interesting. You go to the web page and it says superintendent. You click on superintendent, it has all these reports that nobody pays attention to. It's the superintendent's reports, and they're really important. Because obviously these are, legally you have to do these kinds of things, but then nobody really pays attention to them. And when you look at your own school, I just want you to put faces to kids. That's what I want you to do. I want you to think about kids who, you're invested in having a future. Recently, I heard this, so I heard another terrible comment. So I'm telling you it's terrible because I want to prepare you. Someone said, well, we don't really need to worry about anything. You just need to get through this because, this was to an English learner. Because once you get this taken care of, you can just, get a job as a baggage handler in the airport because they're always, hiring people to do that. I'm thinking, okay, so that's the only vision you have for this child who is coming to you for advice. This is somebody who was giving him advice. Oh, don't really worry about that. You can get a, pretty good job as a baggage handler at the airport. So we want a different kind of future for our kids, right? Shall I send you copies of the transcripts of what kids say, their experiences? And I'm not going to identify this. I won't identify the schools, but just so you see. Okay. I love you guys. Take care.